I vividly remember meeting Julie for the first time on a rainy afternoon, just as I started a new job at her company. She was kind, funny, and her energy lit up every room. We quickly became inseparable and soon fell in love. Our wedding was small, just close friends and family, exactly how Julie wanted it. And it was perfect. Those were the happiest days of my life. But life can be cruel. Julie's sudden end of life in an accident devastated me, leaving me lost and heartbroken. It took years to heal. And just when I thought I'd never love again, I met Rachel. She brought joy back into my life and I began to move forward. Still, moving on was anything but easy. Now, preparing for my second marriage, I can't help but reflect on how simple my wedding to Julie was. This time, Rachel wanted a big, extravagant event. The details, like color-matching napkins and flower arrangements, were endless and exhausting, though I had little say. My mother-in-law, Rachel, and her friend Amber made the decisions, while my suggestions, inspired by my wedding with Julie, were ignored. I once told Rachel, "Yes, I love Julie deeply, and losing her was unbearable. But that doesn't mean I should forget her or pretend she never existed." Rachel knew my past, and Julie would always be a part of me. Despite the chaos of wedding planning, everything seemed settled, except for minor details, like the color of the umbrella in case of rain, or the car to take us from the church. At this point, the only things left unresolved seemed to be out of our control. I stayed silent about it, though. Everyone seemed happy with the wedding preparations, but I felt the need to reconnect with Rachel, who had grown distant. I figured it was the stress of the upcoming wedding. Rachel had always known about my past with Julie, and had helped me through my darkest times. She pulled me out of depression and back into life. She was even patient when I accidentally called her Julie during physical moments, though that happened less over time. I grew to love Rachel deeply, maybe as much as I had loved Julie. However, Rachel was sensitive when I suggested she dress like Julie, and she didn't want me to remove Julie's pictures from my home after she moved in. We also clashed over keeping some of Julie's things versus Rachel's desire to redecorate. It was tough, but we worked through it and grew closer, eventually leading to my proposal. Rachel said yes, but after a long, unsettling pause. I had thought she would be excited, given how much she had pursued me. When she finally spoke, she said, "Yes, Alex, I want to marry you, but..." "But what?" I asked, accidentally calling her Julie again. She looked pained, and I quickly corrected myself, but the damage was done. "Alex, I know you've been through a lot, but I think you still love more than one woman," she said tearfully. I reassured her, promising that I loved only her. She cried, then accepted my proposal fully, but a shadow seemed to linger over us after that. It was hard to tell if it was because of the wedding stress or something deeper. To reconnect with Rachel, I planned a surprise wellness weekend. Her mood had been sour during the preparations, and I hoped the trip would help. I vowed not to mention Julie or any wedding details. When I told Rachel about the weekend, she smiled and kissed me, something that had become rare. "A romantic weekend? Oh, Alex, that's so sweet. Thank you," she said. Rachel seemed pleased, and I realized how tense I had been, fearing rejection. Luckily, the surprise hit the mark. "Oh, perfect. Just what we needed to fix things between us." "Yeah, the hotel's great. It has an amazing spa. Julie really loved the seafood restaurant here. You'll see, it'll be fantastic." Damn. I mentioned Julie again. I cursed myself, but Rachel just gave me a strange look. We arrived early, and despite the bad weather, everything was perfect. The hotel, the spa, and our room. I felt optimistic that this would help us reconnect. "This room is beautiful, Alex," Rachel said, looking around. "Yeah, once the weather clears, you can see the lake. It's really romantic," Alex replied. "Oh, how do you know?" Rachel asked, her tone curious. "I've stayed in this room before," Alex admitted. "Oh, you have?" she responded, a bit surprised. "Yeah, with Julie," Alex added, but stopped himself from saying more. "Oh." Rachel looked a bit stunned by the revelation. "You asked for this room," Alex reminded her, trying to ease the tension. "Yeah, I like it," Rachel replied, though her voice had lost some enthusiasm. "I see," Alex said, noticing her irritation. It frustrated him. Why did he have to deny his past with Julie? Rachel knew he loved her. Was it such a big deal to stay in the same room he had shared with his late wife? Shortly after they arrived, a snowstorm hit, and the front desk informed them they'd be stuck at the hotel for a few days. Alex didn't mind. It felt romantic, and he planned to enjoy time alone with Rachel, but she seemed less excited. "I just hope I can get back to work on time," Rachel said abruptly, which annoyed Alex. Let's grab a bite to eat. The restaurant here is great, Alex suggested, trying to change the subject. They were seated at a nice table, one Alex had sat at before with Julie. Let me guess, you sat here with Julie? Rachel asked, her voice laced with sarcasm. Yes, it has a nice view, Alex responded, trying to remain calm. Maybe I should wear a wig, Rachel snapped. A wig? Alex repeated, confused. Yeah, and dress like Julie, she said, her tone sharp. Rachel, stop being ridiculous, Alex said, growing frustrated. Alex, this has to stop, Rachel insisted, her voice firm. You knew about my past from the start, Alex countered. Yes, but I'm not going to relive your life with her. I want to make new memories, not live in Julie's shadow, Rachel said, her frustration clear. Rachel, Julie is part of who I am, Alex explained, trying to make her understand. So I have to share you with her for the rest of my life? Rachel asked, her anger rising. That's not what I mean, Alex started to say. Well, I guess I'll have to deal with it. But if sharing is the deal, you'd better learn something about it too, Rachel shot back, her voice full of anger. I could tell Rachel was struggling with the situation, and I should have been more diplomatic, but it was a sore spot for me too. Before I could say anything, she left the table. I decided to follow her to the buffet, intending to talk and reassure her. She was already in line, chatting with a tall, handsome guy who was clearly interested. They laughed, touched hands, and looked like a couple. I don't usually get jealous, but this was unsettling. They filled each other's plates, giggling like teens, and then sat at a small table for two. I felt a rush of unease, but joined them anyway. Hi, I'm Alex, Rachel's fiancé. I introduced myself, extending a hand. The guy ignored me completely, which hurt. Rachel giggled, clearly trying to get under my skin. Rachel, what's going on? I asked, annoyed. She and the guy, Danny, kept talking and laughing while I sat there, humiliated. Rachel didn't mention me or our wedding, and I grew more frustrated as they bonded over work and family. You're an amazing woman, Rachel. I'm glad we met, Danny said. And I can't believe you're here alone, Danny. I'm glad we're snowed in. It's going to be great, Rachel replied, flirting openly. Rachel, I shouted, but she ignored me. Then she leaned over and kissed him, leaving me stunned. The entire restaurant gasped. I felt utterly humiliated. I didn't want to cause a scene, but I was furious. Rachel continued playing this cruel game, and when she suggested going to his room, Danny looked surprised but willing. They left together, leaving me alone and humiliated. I returned to our room, too stunned to think straight. Hours passed, and I couldn't shake my anger, hurt, and doubts about the marriage. Eventually, I asked the front desk for Danny's room number. They couldn't tell me directly, but hinted it was 107. I went outside, found their room, and saw them cozy on the couch. At least they were fully clothed. I took a picture. They spotted me, waved, and kissed again, clearly mocking me. I took another photo and left, unable to watch any longer. I was crushed, questioning everything about our relationship. Later that night, I saw them in the restaurant, acting like a couple, hugging, kissing, enjoying themselves. I took more pictures, then ordered room service to avoid further humiliation. I waited for Rachel to return and make things right, but she never did. Around 10 p.m., I went back to check their room. The curtains were mostly closed, but I could still see through the gaps. They were kissing again, and then things escalated. I kept taking photos, trying to stay calm, even though it was unbearable. Finally, when they finished and cuddled on the couch, I left, freezing and heartbroken. I went back to our room, cried, pounded the bed in frustration, uploaded the photos to my cloud, and finally fell asleep after taking some sleeping pills. I woke up around 9, with Rachel sitting in a chair, watching me quietly. Neither of us said a word. I wasn't angry anymore, just sad. Thoughts of what could have been ran through my mind. She didn't even look remorseful, just content, as if unaware or indifferent to the impact of her actions. Maybe this had been her plan all along. Are you feeling better now? She asked. No. I'm going to spend the day with Danny until we leave. My stuff is already in his room. After that, I'll be yours again. Unless you mention Julie, she said calmly. No, I replied in the same tone. Enjoy yourself. She left without another word. I couldn't believe how arrogant she'd become. Maybe I had misjudged her all along. She didn't want to end the relationship, just teach me a lesson. Sure, I'd been careless mentioning Julie, but her reaction was extreme. It was over between us. Stuck at the hotel, I felt trapped and humiliated, desperately wanting to escape. My mind kept spiraling, and I knew I needed a distraction. As I headed for breakfast, Michael from the front desk stopped me. You don't have to stay here. The roads will open for a short time today. Follow the supply truck, and you'll be able to leave before the next storm hits. Thank you, Michael. I meant it, and tipped him generously. The idea of escape lifted a huge weight off my shoulders. I packed up, checked out, and followed the delivery truck to the highway with no issues. The drive home was long, and I struggled to process everything that had happened. One thing was clear. There would be no wedding. I canceled everything, the venue, the caterer, the DJ, and sent out simple wedding cancellation notices. Due to unforeseen circumstances, we regret to inform you that our wedding has been canceled. I didn't feel the need to air the dirty details. I also reached out to the San Francisco company I'd turned down because of Rachel. They welcomed me back, saying, "Come here, Alex. We'll find you a place and the job is still yours. Sounds like your ex did you a favor." I wasn't ready to laugh about it yet, but I was relieved. If this had happened 6 months into marriage, it would have been much worse. The pain of losing someone I loved was real, but her betrayal made moving on easier. A whole new life was ahead of me, and for the first time I felt like I truly dodged a bullet. I quit my job, packed my car, and left our apartment. On a whim, I even peed in her underwear drawer, though it didn't feel good afterward. Just a childish act to show my frustration. The drive to San Francisco would take 4 or 5 days, and I looked forward to the solitude and time to reflect. After 2 days of anger and resentment, my phone rang as I started my trip. "Alex, it's Rachel. Thank God the roads are clearing," Rachel said. Alex regretted answering. All the anger surged back and he stayed silent. "Alex, are you there?" Rachel asked, her voice tense. "Yes," Alex replied flatly. "Did you cancel the wedding?" "My parents called," Rachel said, her tone anxious. "Yes, of course. What did you expect? That I'd still marry you?" Alex responded, his frustration evident. "Alex, please. I was just hurt about the Julie thing and made a mistake. I'm yours now. Nothing has to change," Rachel pleaded. "Maybe, but that person won't be me," Alex said coldly. "What?" Rachel asked, shocked. "I don't care how you justify it. We're done," Alex stated firmly. "Alex, please come get me. We need to talk," Rachel begged, her voice breaking. "No, I'm not your responsibility anymore, and I'm not in the neighborhood," Alex replied dismissively. "Where are you?" Rachel asked, desperate. "Kearney, Nebraska. I'm heading to California, starting a new life without you," Alex said, his voice resolute. Rachel began to sob, but Alex hung up. When the phone rang again, he blocked her number. He resumed his journey, though the anger still lingered. An hour later, the phone rang again. "Alex speaking?" Alex answered, sounding tired. "Hey, Alex, it's Carl, Rachel's father. Did you cancel the wedding?" Carl asked, his tone concerned. "Yeah, or, more accurately, Rachel did with her behavior," Alex replied. "What happened?" Carl asked. "She flirted with a guy right in front of me, kissed him, went to his room, and spent the weekend with him. The whole hotel knew," Alex explained, his voice tinged with bitterness. Carl was silent for a moment. "I'm sorry, Alex, you're right. She's not ready for marriage. I apologize on her behalf," Carl said regretfully. "No hard feelings, Carl. I always liked you and Sue," Alex replied, softening his tone. "What will you do now?" Carl asked. "I'm heading to San Francisco to start fresh," Alex said. "Good luck, Alex. You're a good man," Carl said sincerely. "Thanks, Carl. Goodbye," Alex replied, ending the conversation. That call hurt. My future had fallen apart in just days. Friends called during the drive, and though I didn't share details, most seemed to understand the breakup. Eventually, the calls stopped, and I focused on starting my new life. But it wasn't easy. My thoughts kept drifting back to Rachel, the good times, and that awful weekend. After 2 months in San Francisco, my doorbell rang one Friday evening. Expecting Jehovah's Witnesses, I reluctantly opened it, but it was worse. Rachel, looking beautiful and nervous. I immediately slammed the door. She rang again, but I turned off the doorbell. How did she find me? I knew I couldn't avoid her forever, so I reopened the door, but she was gone. Good. The next morning, the doorbell rang again. Still groggy, I opened it, and there she was. I let her in without a word, resigned to the inevitable conversation. We sat in silence, sipping coffee. She had clearly made an effort to look exactly how I liked, but my feelings for her were gone. This realization made me calm. "Alex," she whispered, struggling to speak. "I'm sorry." I stayed quiet, letting her talk. "I've been awful, and I'm sorry it took so long to find you. You can mention Julie whenever. It's something I'll just have to live with. I was insecure and thought you didn't really love me, that I was just a substitute. You kept pictures of her everywhere. You called me Julie sometimes, and she was always in your mind during wedding planning. Taking me to that spa where you'd been with her, it was too much. I snapped, and I'm sorry. I nodded, understanding. I should have been more sensitive, but that doesn't justify humiliating me and cheating on me. I know, she said, tearing up. I've regretted it every day. We sat in silence, unsure of what to do next. How did you find me? I asked. All our friends know your address, but none wanted to tell me. I tricked someone by borrowing their phone, she admitted. I was glad my friends had my back. I gave up our apartment and my job. I rented a place nearby and am looking for work. I was surprised by what Rachel said, but it didn't change anything for me. Her news didn't make me happy. It just meant she'd be around, making things harder. Still, I felt strong enough to resist her. Alex, I know I hurt you at the hotel. I did it on purpose and humiliated you in public. I pushed you away and you had no choice but to leave. At first, I didn't understand why I did it. I loved you then, and I still do. I didn't care about Danny. He was attractive, but I didn't even like him. I tried to convince myself it was about teaching you a lesson, but deep down, I knew I just wanted to hurt you. So, what was the real reason? Alex asked, his voice calm but probing. My dad thinks I was just jealous, Rachel admitted softly. Jealous of a dead woman? Alex asked, incredulous. You always talked about Julie like she was perfect, the most beautiful, flawless woman. I felt like I couldn't compete with her. I was so intimidated by her memory that I didn't even want to accept your proposal, even though it was my dream, Rachel confessed, her voice cracking. Rachel, I'm sorry for making you feel that way, Alex said, guilt creeping into his voice. Julie wasn't perfect, and we had our arguments, but I didn't think it was right to mention those after she died. I shouldn't have put her on a pedestal in front of you. Oh, Alex, Rachel sobbed and lunged toward him, seeking comfort. Wait, Alex stopped her gently. I said you could compete with her in the past, but now my view of you is tainted. Alex, she whispered through her tears, give me a chance to prove you wrong. I'll be patient. I'll stay by your side until you trust me again. You can still talk about Julie, and I'll learn to live with it. I don't know. It's not that simple, Alex replied, shaking his head. I'll do whatever it takes, no matter how long, Rachel pleaded, her determination growing. Quite the speech, Rachel. I believe you, Alex said calmly, though his neutral tone confused her. How do you feel about me? She asked, almost in a whisper. I still love you. I haven't been with anyone since that night. I think I've mostly forgotten you, though. I'm not mad anymore, Alex admitted. But I also don't love you anymore. Rachel flinched at his words, but quickly regained her composure. That's bad, but I can work with it. You loved me once. Maybe you'll fall in love with me again. Rachel, I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Your reaction was completely out of proportion. What's next if I forget to take out the trash? Hire a hitman? Trust isn't even a goal for me right now. I swear I'll never be that stupid again. If we get back together, I'll sign a contract. If you leave me, I get nothing. No money, no kids, nothing. Kids? I laughed, surprised. Yes, if we ever get back together. Here's the contract, she said, handing me a document. I was shocked to see how harsh it was. If we broke up, she'd get nothing, not even visitation rights. I doubted it was even legal. Did Carl help you write this? Alex asked, raising an eyebrow. Yeah, is it that obvious? Rachel admitted, a bit embarrassed. Well, I don't want to be with you because of a contract. And the real issue remains. I don't love you anymore. I don't trust you. I'm not even sure I like you, Alex replied, his tone firm. That last comment seemed to sting. I don't even like myself, Rachel admitted softly. I get that. You hurt me deeply for no reason, Alex said, shaking his head. Alex, how about this? Show me around San Francisco. We can just be friends and you can see how things go, Rachel suggested, trying to find a middle ground. Alex paused, considering her offer. He wondered if avoiding Rachel would feel like running away, and that would seem weak. The truth was, he still liked her, even if he didn't trust her, and he didn't want to hide. Plus, he had no friends in San Francisco, so her company might be welcome. Spending time with her would prove to him that he was over her. I don't know the city that well either, but I can show you what I know, Alex replied finally. Thanks, Alex, Rachel said, smiling as she headed to the kitchen to make breakfast, humming confidently. Alex didn't mind her being around. but he knew there was no chance of them getting back together, contract or no contract. Over the next few weeks, Rachel eagerly sought time with Alex, often wearing revealing outfits and finding excuses to touch him. Once, while wearing a loose t-shirt, she kept leaning forward, practically offering a view of her cleavage, but Alex wasn't interested. He looked everywhere but at her chest, smiling inwardly as she tried harder to catch his attention. Eventually, he left the room to stop himself from laughing. Another time, she wore hot pants so short they resembled a bikini bottom, pairing them with stiletto heels. She spent the day bending over in front of him, pretending to look for something. "Rachel, are you looking for something? Can I help?" Alex asked, raising an eyebrow. "No, I'm fine. Just thought I lost an earring," she replied, clearly frustrated. When they went shopping together, Rachel found every excuse to press her body against Alex, but he pretended not to notice, enjoying the irony of her frustration. She was clearly hot for him, but he kept rejecting her advances, probably hurting her ego. Alex felt a little sorry for her, but he wasn't going to sleep with her just to make her feel better. She was trying to win him back in cheap ways, and it wasn't working. Weeks later, they sat in Alex's living room, and Rachel's advances had slowed down. Suddenly, she asked bluntly, "Alex, when are you going to entertain me again?" "What?" Alex asked, caught off guard by her directness, though he knew exactly what she meant. "You know you can have me, right? Just for fun, no strings attached." "I'm on the pill, clean and free," Rachel said, her voice suggestive. I didn't know how to let her down gently. She was beautiful, but she was still Rachel, the same Rachel who had told me, "It's already decided. Try to have a good time." While I was lost in thought, she pulled off her sweater, revealing a t-shirt underneath with big text saying, "Alex's girlfriend." She turned around to show the same words on the back. "Nice, huh?" she said, smiling. "Yes," I replied, still shocked. "I bought 20 of these. I plan to wear them everywhere. I know it's not true yet, but I want to show my commitment. However, I need your approval to wear them in public." Her eyes sparkled with hope, waiting for me to agree. I shook my head. "That's impossible. Let's just be friends, okay?" Her face fell, and her eyes watered, but she stayed strong. "Okay, Alex, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to push. I'm surprised I can even spend time with you again, but that's all I'm willing to do." "I understand," she said, looking utterly disappointed. "Alex, I have time. I have no other plans. I'll keep working to get you back. I'll be patient. You can even glorify Julie if you want. I'll learn to live with it." I sighed, unsure how to respond. I didn't want to hurt Rachel or seek revenge, but I also didn't want her holding on to false hope. Still, she kept hanging around, clearly wanting more, though she didn't push too hard. Her hopes were high, but I remained determined not to start a real relationship with her. I told her as much, but it didn't stop her efforts. One night I got home late and was frustrated the light was out again. Stumbling in the dark, I accidentally kicked something soft. I used my phone's flashlight and saw a small woman curled up on the floor. Confused, I carried her inside. She was dirty but seemed healthy, so I put her in the guest room, covered her with blankets, and went to bed. I woke up unexpectedly in the middle of the night, not because of my alarm, but because of something pleasant. I should have told her to stop, but all I managed was a weak, yeah. We had sex, and before I knew it, she disappeared back into the guest room. It was over as quickly as it started, leaving me wondering if it had even happened. The next morning, I heard her humming in the shower. She was thin but had a pretty face and seemed relaxed while eating breakfast. We didn't talk about the night before. After eating, she got dressed, said, "You're a nice guy," and left without a trace. I was stunned. I had just slept with a woman whose name I didn't even know. Then when I found a needle in the trash, a chill ran down my spine. Panic set in as I realized we hadn't used protection. I immediately went to the doctor, who told me I didn't have any detectable STDs but needed to wait for some results. I swore I'd think before acting next time. Meanwhile, Rachel continued pushing for more, but I couldn't see myself being with her again. I still found her attractive, but the love I once felt was gone. She wisely kept her marriage and kids' talk to a minimum, knowing too much pressure would push me away. We spent time together as friends, and while she hoped for more, I knew it was never going to happen. Months later, Rachel and I were about to have dinner when the doorbell rang. She jumped up to answer it, always eager to assert herself as if she were still my partner. I let her, realizing I'd been keeping her around for companionship while never fully clarifying that we wouldn't get back together. Despite her beauty and the fact she could be with someone else, she remained determined to win me over. When the door opened, I turned to see the woman I'd met months earlier standing there, still thin, except for her noticeably large stomach. Rachel looked surprised, but quickly understood the implications of the woman's visit and her condition. "Please, come in," Rachel said quietly. "Join us for dinner. I'm Rachel." "Annie," the woman mumbled, uninterested in pleasantries. Annie sat down without hesitation and began eating. "I'm pregnant," she said bluntly, confirming what we had guessed. "It's yours," she added, pointing her fork at me. I stared at the steak on her fork, trying to process it. "You're the only one I've had unprotected sex with," she continued, as if discussing the weather. I was too shocked to respond. Rachel, however, stayed calm. "Really? The only one?" I muttered, still in disbelief. "That's hard to believe." "Nevertheless, it's true," Annie replied, unfazed. "Don't worry. I want to work things out. I like you, and I don't want trouble. Funny thing is, I don't even know your name." "I'm Alex," I said weakly. "Nice to meet you. It was fun having sex with you," she grinned. Rachel even chuckled a bit. "Alex, you slept with her without knowing her name?" Rachel asked, surprisingly calm. "Yeah, I guess so." "So? What now? Do you want infanticide?" Rachel asked. "No, it's too late. I've seen the ultrasounds. It's a baby now, and I can't end her life," Annie replied, her tone more serious. Rachel didn't miss a beat. "No problem. We'll adopt her." "What?" I dropped my fork, completely shocked. Rachel turned to me. "Shut up, Alex. This is a woman's matter. This could have been my baby if I hadn't messed up." I tried to speak, but Rachel was already making decisions. Annie nodded, agreeing with Rachel's plan. "You can't raise a child while using pills," Rachel said firmly. Annie hesitated, then admitted, "You're right. I've been on hard substances for a while, and I'm not sure I can stop, even for my baby. My life is a mess." The mood turned somber. Rachel remained composed. "Keeping you off pills is Alex's job. You'll live here, stay clean, and I'll adopt the baby. After that, you're free." Annie thought for a moment, then agreed. "Okay, deal." Rachel extended her hand, and Annie shook it. Just like that, my fate was sealed. I got up and cleared the dishes while the two women made plans for my life. Annie was set to stay in the guest room, and Rachel began staying over more frequently. Though Rachel hinted we'd be a couple again, I stayed quiet, grateful for her help, but uneasy with how things were unfolding. The next morning, we moved Annie's things from her old place to my apartment. Her previous place was so bad I wouldn't have parked my car there. "Wow, your life's been rough, huh?" Alex asked while packing. "Yeah, and it's about to get worse," she replied with a smirk. "Hey, I'm not that bad," Alex joked, trying to lighten the mood. "Ever heard of cold turkey?" she asked, her tone turning serious. "Not the food, right?" Alex quipped. "Nope, get your guest room ready. There'll be vomit and it'll be hell," she said bluntly. "Well, hopefully my daughter will appreciate it someday," she added with an ironic smile. "Our daughter," Alex corrected, surprising even himself with the words. "Really?" she asked, tears filling her eyes. "Our daughter," Alex repeated firmly. "You're not alone." "Oh, Alex, thank you." She hugged him tightly, though Alex noticed her glancing warily at Rachel. Later she asked, "Do you have vacation left?" "I can take 2 weeks unpaid," Alex responded. "The first 3 days will be the worst," she warned. "What should I expect?" Alex asked, preparing himself. "All the good stuff," she said sarcastically. "Vomiting, sweating, shaking, screaming at you, trying to escape. I'll hate you." "Got it," Alex said, resigned to what was coming. And that's exactly what happened. Twice she nearly escaped while I cleaned her bathroom. I ended up with scrapes and bruises, and the room was wrecked. She screamed a lot, but we survived the first 3 days. By then, I was familiar with all her bodily functions, and none of it was remotely pleasant. I sat by her bed, exhausted, looking at the trembling, vomit-covered mess. I didn't feel noble, just tired and dirty, helping a woman I'd carelessly impregnated. The whole thing was awkward, gross, and depressing, and I barely noticed the smell of vomit anymore. Her erratic sleep schedule left me equally sleep-deprived. A few hours later, she was up and pacing. "The worst is over. I need to be alone now. I'll take a walk." "Anna, you can't leave yet. 2 weeks, then you're free." "Let me go," she screamed. "No, Anna." She shifted to pleading. "Please, I need something to ease the pain." "Let's get something to eat," I suggested, trying to calm her. "Okay," she said, but suddenly made a run for the door. Luckily, she couldn't open it. It pushed instead of pulled. After that, I remembered to lock it, just to be safe. A few days later, she looked much better. Her eyes were clear again, and she seemed to have regained her composure. She was also sweating and shivering less, though she was still too thin. Now that her hair wasn't piled up and her skin wasn't so shiny, she was looking quite beautiful again. The worrying part was her attachment and emotional instability, which made me a bit uneasy. I couldn't tell if it was due to the pregnancy or the withdrawal, but she suddenly started touching me constantly, hugging and kissing me. That is, when she wasn't sitting in the corner crying or laughing. I couldn't fully avoid her emotional swings. When she was sad, it hurt me. When she was goofy, I usually joined in. When she was clingy, I enjoyed the closeness of this pretty woman. And when she was suddenly turned on, you can guess what happened. Suddenly, we were back in bed together, having sex again. It was intense, full of need and desire. I hadn't realized how much I wanted this little woman until now, but I really, really needed to have her, and I was sure she felt the same. It seemed like her withdrawal, with all the vomiting, shaking, screaming, and yelling, had somehow bonded us. I was still aware I was having unprotected sex with a courtesan again, despite my promise not to be that stupid anymore. But at least she couldn't get pregnant again. And surprisingly, I never felt like I was with a hooker. She was actually pretty shy and even cried a little afterward, clinging to me like a burr. I didn't mind, not one bit. We sat on the bed afterward, me feeling satisfied and still a little surprised. "So I guess you don't hate me as much anymore, huh?" I asked. "Don't be so sure, mister. That was still my bad side. Wait until you see me at my best. No, really. I think I've beaten my demons now, and I'm starting to think straight again. No, I never hated you. You were just trying to help me and our baby, and I'm grateful for that." She smiled cheekily. She was very charming, and she was getting prettier every time. If this kept up, I'd have to fight guys off with a stick. Wait, what? Why do I feel like I need to protect her? Did I really think she was my woman? I decided to deal with this problem with a proven tactic, procrastination. In the weeks that followed, the Spencer family seemed very relaxed. Annie and I got to know each other surprisingly well. Being sick and getting yelled at seemed to have created a strong bond between us. It helped that I was no longer stuck in the role of prison warden. We grew closer every day, laughing a lot and having sex. I even noticed a few glances in my direction that might have been longing. Yeah, honestly, I was starting to look at her the same way. Of course, Rachel still visited us regularly, and she didn't miss the changes. "Alex, you two aren't developing some kind of love relationship, are you?" she asked. "I'm not sure, Rachel. We're definitely getting closer." She looked completely shocked. "Alex, don't do this to me. I feel like I'm so close to getting you back. Don't let me lose you to that fool, okay? Rachel, you know that." Yes, I know. I'm not asking for anything. You can do whatever you want, but you know I still haven't given up hope. Alex, I'm going to keep fighting for you. I won't give up, even if it takes decades." I just sighed and let the matter drop because Annie had walked into the room. I knew Rachel was struggling, but I was starting to see Annie as my girlfriend now. And I'm definitely a one-woman man. Annie and I grew even closer as I made sure she stayed away from pills, went with her to checkups, bought tons of baby supplies, and did everything else parents do to prepare for a new baby. We acted like a normal couple, and that's exactly how it felt to me. After our daughter Mel was born, everything became clearer. Annie, Mel, and I were a family, no question about it. The idea of giving Mel up for adoption now seemed absurd. Of course, we were going to keep her. Rachel noticed all of this during her frequent visits. "Alex, I've lost you forever, haven't I?" she asked. "Yes, Rachel. What we had is over." "Alex, please," she sobbed. "This isn't fair. I know I completely screwed up that weekend, but I did everything I could to make things right. Doesn't that count for something?" "I don't know if it's fair. I belonged to you exclusively, but you were the one who separated us for no good reason. That meant we were both free to be with someone else, and that's what happened. It's not about fairness, and it wasn't intentional. There's no set price for what you did that weekend. You threw a bomb between us, and you never know which direction will be blown. In my case, it led me to Annie." "Alex!" She was openly sobbing now. I walked over and wrapped my arms around her. "Rachel, you're still young and beautiful. Go find the right man, and don't do anything like that again, okay?" "No, Alex. I'll wait for you." "No, don't." There was nothing I could do. I sighed. She was right. If she had chosen to throw her life away, that was tragic. But I couldn't stop her. That's how things ended with Rachel. It was sad because I once loved her, and things could have been great. But I didn't love her anymore. And she didn't love me either. I was starting to fall for Anna. No, actually, I was already completely in love with her. Her awkward, innocent, and charming ways, her sweet face, and her complete devotion to me. She practically worshipped me. The biggest difference with Rachel was that I actually trusted Anna, which was strange. I trusted a former pill dependent and courtesan, but couldn't bring myself to trust my ex-wife, who had only been wild for one weekend. The next few years brought us a small civil wedding, raising Mel, Rachel's disappearance, thankfully, and no recurring pill issues. Life with Anna wasn't always easy, of course. She still had major mood swings, but by then, I knew her well enough to handle it. The deep love we had for each other helped too. Mel was amazing. She had me wrapped around her little finger. Everything fell apart shortly after Mel's second birthday. I just put Mel to bed while Anna was still out shopping. Mel had worn me out again, and I collapsed on the couch, ready to zone out in front of the TV like usual. The doorbell rang the moment I sat down. Annoyed, I got up and opened the door. 2 policemen stood there. "Good evening. How can I help you?" "Good evening, Mr. Spencer. I'm Sergeant Jacobs. Are you married to Anna Spencer?" "Yeah. What's wrong?" I asked, suddenly feeling anxious. "Mr. Spencer, I am very sorry to inform you that we found your wife dead. Would you please come with us?" I didn't understand the rest. I collapsed. I'd kissed her goodbye just 2 hours ago. Was that the last time Mel or I would ever see her alive? Was she really never coming back? Would I never hear her laugh again? Never kiss her? Never hear her curse when she stepped on my foot? Never feel her snuggle into me? Never smell her scent again? "Annie, where are you? What happened? Why?" After who knows how long, a policeman shook me. "Mr. Spencer, are you all right? Should we call an ambulance?" No, I'm fine." It turned out she had died of a massive hard substances overdose. I had no idea she was still using. One of the officers casually mentioned he knew her, said she worked part-time as a courtesan and was too experienced with pills to make such a fatal mistake. They were sure she had eliminated herself. I was stunned. I didn't know. I barely knew her. She had been living a double life. Within days, I was shattered, unable to work, struggling to take care of Mel. A week after her end of life, I sat on the couch again, staring blankly at the TV, crying occasionally, feeling lost and incapable of handling the situation, emotionally and practically. Mel was crying again, which had become normal. Losing Annie devastated me and created a host of practical problems. My time off was almost over, and I needed to return to work. How was I going to take care of Mel? I had no family nearby and no one to rely on. Could I hire a babysitter? Could I trust anyone? Most of the people I'd trusted had deceived me in some way. Yeah, even Anna. Thinking back, she loved me, but she also deceived me. She lived a double life as a courtesan and pill dependent while I was at work or away on business. And now she had left me and Mel without a word or explanation. Ding dong. The doorbell rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. It had been ringing for a while. Mel was still crying. I felt completely overwhelmed. By Anna's end of life, by Mel's constant crying, by the weight of everything. I had tried to feed her and failed again, and I couldn't rock her to sleep. I felt helpless. Ding dong. The door or Mel? I had no idea what to do with Mel, but the door gave me a clear task. I could walk over, open it, and see who was there. So I did, and instantly regretted it. "No, please, no more complications. My life's hard enough as it is," I muttered. It was Rachel. "No," was all I managed to say. "You look awful." "I'm so sorry, Alex. It must have been terrible," she said softly, stepping in and hugging me. Strangely, I felt nothing. After 2 years apart, this was the woman I almost married. Yet I felt nothing. Shouldn't I feel something? Anger, sadness, anything? But there was only awkward indifference. Or maybe I was just too exhausted. She didn't seem to notice. Finally, she let go and carried the large bag she had with her into Mel's room. "Hey," I weakly protested, but followed her into the room, too exhausted to resist. She picked up Mel from the bed, gently rocked her, and hummed a quiet tune. Amazingly, Mel started calming down. After a while, she seemed completely content, which astonished me. Rachel carefully laid her back in bed, covered her up, and then walked straight into the kitchen as if she lived here, unloading her bags and preparing food for Mel. "How did you—" I started. "I've read all about it." "What? When?" "When I heard about Anna's end of life. I knew right away that you'd be in trouble, Alex," she said matter-of-factly, though I noticed her stealing quick glances in my direction, betraying her calm exterior. "Do you still live in the neighborhood?" "Of course. I never moved. And no, I'm not dating anyone. Yes, I've been watching you. No, I haven't had a man since that weekend when I ruined my life." She turned to face me, tears welling up in her eyes. "Yes, I still love you." she whispered, and then quickly left the room. I followed her to Mel's room and watched as she rocked and fed her. Damn, why wasn't Mel crying? Usually when I tried, the entire neighborhood needed earplugs. Rachel handled Mel effortlessly. She had come prepared. After a while, she turned to me again. What's your plan, Alex? I'll take care of you, she continued before I could answer. I'll always be here for you, always. I stayed in the background so I wouldn't interfere with your marriage. But now that you're struggling, I have to step in. That was quite a declaration. This woman had clearly made up her mind to dedicate her life to me, which was remarkable. Was it love or guilt? Could guilt drive someone to wait patiently for 2 years and then rush to help like this? What do you mean? Alex asked, feeling more confused than ever. I quit my job, she announced. You what? Alex replied, shocked. How else can I take care of you and Mel? You need a full-time nanny, and Mel needs me too, she said with a smile. To Alex's surprise, he found himself laughing for the first time in ages. She was right. Have you eaten anything? She asked, concerned. Since when? Alex responded. Since Anna's end of life, she said softly. I don't remember, Alex admitted. All right, Mel's fed. Now it's your turn. Just sit on the couch, she instructed. Alex did as she said, sitting down and realizing how grateful he was for her presence. Having someone to talk to, someone to fend off the loneliness and helplessness was a huge relief. He could hear her rattling pots and pans in the kitchen. After a while, she returned with a plate of food. Feeling better? She asked, handing him the plate. Yes, less lonely. And you're right. I do need help with Mel. Thank you. But what about your job? Alex asked, still processing everything. Alex, for 2 years, I haven't had a life. I haven't gone out or spent much. I've just stayed in my little apartment. The only thing I spent money on was the gym, she explained. You? The gym? Alex asked, surprised. Yes, I wanted to. Well, I'll explain later. She blushed a little. Anyway, I've saved up a lot. I can live for almost a year without working. We'll figure things out before then, she assured him. Oh, Alex said, feeling like he'd been thrown a lifeline but unsure how to respond. Yes, I'll take care of you. In a year, you'll know what to do with your life. Maybe you'll meet someone new. Maybe you'll reconsider other options, she said with a small smile. Oh, I have to check on dinner. The meal was delicious, and Alex thanked her repeatedly. Afterward, he felt the urge to collapse into bed and sleep for a week. But she wasn't having it. Oh no, mister. You're not going to bed without a shower and brushing your teeth, okay? She teased. Yes, Mom, Alex joked, and she gave him a playful nudge in the ribs. She was right, though. His hygiene had been terrible lately. When I stepped out of the shower, I found my bed freshly made. It hit me that Anna had been the last one to make it, and the thought saddened me. As I climbed into bed under Rachel's benevolent smile, I couldn't stop thinking about Anna. Was our love real? Could you truly love someone you didn't fully know? She clearly hadn't trusted me enough to tell me everything. Soon after, I drifted into sleep, something I hadn't done peacefully since Anna's end of life. The next morning, I woke up to breakfast waiting on the nightstand. I was surprised I had slept through the night, something that hadn't happened since it all began. How had Rachel managed to keep Mel quiet? She wasn't just determined to help me. She was also quite capable of it. I ate breakfast, feeling a comfort that had escaped me for weeks. A little while later, Rachel entered the room humming happily, holding a sleeping Mel in her arms. She made it all seem so easy. Could a baby really adapt so quickly without her mother? One thing was for sure. I couldn't move on from Anna that easily. I was still grieving, still shocked by her end of life and the double life she had led. It hurt deeply, but I was thankful for Rachel's help, even if I didn't feel any special affection for her. Not yet. Feeling better? She asked, sitting beside me. Physically, yes, thanks to you. Emotionally, I'm still in shock. I don't understand how this all happened. Are you talking about Anna's end of life? She asked softly. About everything. Anna's end of life, the sudden change. I feel like I'm drifting. If you want me to move out, I will, Rachel said quietly. I don't want to impose. No, don't. You're helping me a lot. Please stay. She nodded, and I noticed a tear escape her eye. A few days later, I returned to work, confident Rachel could handle things. She was amazing with Mel, managing everything, including my emotional state, while giving me space when needed. She never tried to kiss me, but she'd hug me when I was down. Exactly what I needed at the time. Alex, I need to visit my parents this weekend. Can you manage a few days alone? She asked about 2 months after Anna's end of life. I realized I didn't want her to leave. It wasn't about practical reasons. I needed her presence, which confused me. Rachel smiled when she noticed, exclaiming, "Yes, yes!" She hugged me, and I realized I still loved her. The feeling had been buried under stress, but it was there. Rachel kissed me for the first time in years, and I hadn't realized how much I needed it. Everything felt good again, even if just for the moment. The sex that followed was a little awkward, but we didn't care. Afterward, Rachel promised, "Just don't hurt me again." "Never, Rachel. Never again," I assured her. We had both suffered, but it wasn't in vain. We had Mel, and I promised to be the best partner I could be. "Good," Rachel said. "You'll handle the weekend alone, but don't stay longer. From now on, this is our home, and we'll be a family." Life started to fall into place. Mel called Rachel Mommy, and we decided not to tell her the truth until she was older, if ever. We were happy as we were. One day, Rachel came to me and said, "Alex, I love Mel like my own, but I want to carry your baby. I was so jealous of Annie." "Then let's do it," I said without hesitation. Rachel became emotional, clearly surprised by my response. I didn't see a problem since we were already a family. "Do you trust me enough to have a baby with me?" I asked. "Yes," she replied, pressing herself against me, sobbing softly. "Thank you for asking, Rachel." "I'd never trick you," she said, looking into my eyes. "I know. So let's start," I replied. "I just need to get off the pill, but we can start practicing right now," she smiled mischievously. And that's exactly what we did. Tonight, we finished a special meal. I insisted on cooking and went all out: candles, a white tablecloth, and 3 courses. Rachel was pleasantly surprised, but I could tell she seemed a little nervous during dinner. I didn't usually do this kind of thing, and she was starting to suspect something. I needed to act quickly if I wanted to keep the surprise intact. I walked around the table and got down on one knee. Her jaw dropped like a stone as I fumbled in my pocket. "Rachel?" I said softly. "Yes?" she asked, wide-eyed. "Would you—" Yes, Alex, yes, of course, I'll marry you," she blurted out before I could finish, her joy overflowing. I went quiet, pulling her into a huge kiss as I fell back under her pregnant body. "Thank you, Rachel," I said, still in awe of the moment. "Are you kidding me? Thanking me? I should be thanking you. And I'll keep thanking you for the rest of my life," she said, her eyes glowing. "And you know, we still have that contract," I teased. "Yes, but I don't think I'll need it," she smiled. "You won't," I reassured her. "Oh, and Rachel, one more thing. It's about Mel," I began cautiously. "She needs a mother." "But she already has one," Rachel said, her tone softening. "Yes, but not legally," I pointed out. Rachel looked at me, and to my surprise, tears filled her eyes. "God, you'll be lucky today," she said through her sobs, "and for the rest of your life." And I was. Now, back in the present, I'm lounging by the pool in the backyard, and my beautiful wife keeps casting longing glances my way while I play with our son. The wedding was small, just in time for my overjoyed father to witness it before he lost his battle with cancer. Before the wedding, I had waited for any sign of Rachel's old madness returning, but she knew exactly what I was thinking and just smiled. "It's not happening, Alex. Not this time. I've learned my role," she said with quiet confidence. She was right. I just hope marriage turns out to be less complicated for others. I always knew the process would be tricky, but Rachel's and my version seemed a bit over the top. Dear readers, if you've actually made it through this story, it ends right here. What follows is an alternate ending for those who prefer quick resolutions. It makes no sense and doesn't relate to the story. I just assume these readers prefer simpler narratives. "It's over, Rachel. I truly loved you, but you've completely destroyed all my feelings for you."
"No!" she howled. "Alex, I can fix this. Please give me another chance. I know how stupid I was, and it won't happen again. I've learned my lesson, and I love only you."
"It's too little. Too late, Rachel. And by the way, your lover Danny tried to confront me. Apparently, he had no idea about my Navy SEAL background. He's not a bad guy, Alex. Did you hurt him badly?" "Not too much, I guess. But he won't be doing much for a while. He didn't realize it was a covert intelligence op." "I'm so sorry about how things turned out, Alex. And don't worry about the $15 million. It's safe in my Cayman offshore account. I know it looked bad when I tried to pill you for the cartel and they attempted to steal your Mustang, but it was never about the money. All I ever wanted was you."
"But you can't have him anymore," a woman's voice said from behind. Rachel spun around, shocked. "And who are you?" Rachel demanded. I'm Sasha, Alex's new fiancée, the woman replied, her voice cool and confident. She was a few years younger than Rachel and looked like a supermodel. And since I run an international private investigation firm, we already have all the evidence we need. If you're not careful, that video of your ménage à trois will end up on the internet. You're finished, Rachel. Alex and I are meant to be together. No, Rachel howled, her voice rising to the intensity of a jet engine. Yes, Sasha continued, unfazed. You had an honest man and you threw him away. Now he's mine and I'm pregnant with his twins. Have a nice life, Rachel. I did love you, but we're done forever. At that moment, Rachel stood frozen, realizing how foolish she had been to treat Alex that way. Jim Carlisle had always considered himself a man of principle. Raised in a small Midwestern town, he had learned the value of hard work and loyalty from his parents, who ran a modest hardware store. His father's words echoed in his mind during tough times. You build trust one brick at a time, but it only takes a single blow to tear it down. Jim met Linda at a local charity event when he was 27. She was vibrant and full of ambition, a stark contrast to his reserved demeanor. Their chemistry was undeniable, and within 2 years, they married, combining their dreams to build a stable and happy family. Jim started a career as an aircraft mechanic, while Linda ventured into event planning, thriving on her creativity and energy. The couple's life seemed idyllic on the surface. They had 2 children, Emma and Tommy, whose laughter filled their home with warmth. But as the years passed, cracks began to form in their relationship. Jim's long hours at work left him exhausted, while Linda's growing social circle often left her absent from family life. Arguments became a regular feature of their evenings, though they always made an effort to shield the kids from the tension. A turning point came during a particularly stressful period. Jim was struggling to meet a tight work deadline, and Linda had taken on a high-profile client whose demands consumed her time. Their communication broke down completely. One evening, Linda didn't come home after a work function, citing exhaustion as the reason she stayed at a colleague's place. Jim's suspicions grew, though he brushed them aside, unwilling to confront the possibility of betrayal. Months later, Jim stumbled upon a series of text messages on Linda's phone while searching for their son's missing tablet. The content left no room for doubt. Linda was involved with another man. Confronting her led to a bitter fight, during which Linda accused Jim of neglect and claimed she felt trapped in the monotony of their life together. Jim's pleas for counseling were met with resistance, as Linda insisted that their marriage was beyond saving. In the weeks that followed, Linda's behavior became increasingly erratic. She spent nights away from home without explanation, leaving Jim to care for the children alone. The final blow came when she suggested separating, citing her need for freedom. The emotional toll on Jim was immense, yet he resolved to stay strong for the sake of Emma and Tommy. But as Linda's absences became more frequent and her detachment more pronounced, Jim began to feel as though his family was slipping away, piece by piece. Jim felt completely overwhelmed by despair. His marriage had dissolved, leaving his life in utter disarray. Everything he had worked tirelessly to build seemed to disappear in a moment, leaving a void that grew heavier with every passing second. Why had she chosen this path? He couldn't comprehend her actions. His mind swirled with endless questions, yet no clarity emerged, only the shattered remnants of a life he struggled to confront. Exiting Morrison's restaurant, he trudged back to the hotel, gathered his belongings, and left hers untouched. Let's see if she even notices her stuff is missing, he muttered to himself. Clothes, makeup, a husband. After checking out, he drove home, parking his Ford Explorer beside the F-150. Staring at the house, he sneered. Home feels more like a tomb, and I'm the ghost stuck inside. Inside, silence greeted him like a suffocating fog. It wasn't peace, it was oppressive. He sank into the living room couch, the weight of his reality pressing down. His tears flowed freely as he sobbed, unable to hold back. Thoughts of his children, Emma and Tommy, filled his mind, making the pain cut even deeper. He sat there for over an hour, spiraling further into despair until something in him snapped. Moving on impulse, he stumbled to the bar, grabbed a bottle of whiskey, and smashed its neck against the counter. He took a swig,
the sharp burn offering no comfort, only a trembling in his hands. In a sudden rage, he hurled the bottle at the fireplace. The glass exploded on impact, scattering shards everywhere and knocking their wedding photo from the mantel. The frame cracked as it hit the floor. A raw, guttural scream tore from him, a sound of primal anguish. "Enough," he whispered hoarsely. "This ends now." Determined, he moved with a cold resolve. In his office, he powered on the computer. The clock glared at him, 10:24 p.m. He muttered bitterly, "Let's see how much damage I can do." Logging into their joint accounts, he systematically drained them, transferring every cent into his personal account. Savings, vacation funds, household budgets, everything disappeared in moments. The final total reads $17,638.38. He stared at the number with a grim smirk. "Revenge on a budget," he muttered. He left a few dollars in 2 accounts before closing the others. But he wasn't done. He typed letters, one to his mother, another to Linda's parents. Each detailed her betrayal and his decision to leave. He drafted emails to news outlets with dates, names, and details, saving everything meticulously. He also wrote letters to Emma and Tommy for their 18th birthdays. These were less about anger and more an explanation, an attempt to help them understand. After printing and sealing the letters, he set them aside, hoping they'd forgive him someday. In the bedroom, he packed a small bag with clothes and essentials. After a quick shower, he dressed, laced up his boots, and stood tall. "This is it," he muttered. "Time to move forward." He grabbed his Giants cap and coat, and while coffee brewed in the kitchen, he scribbled a note on a yellow pad. "Linda, we're done. Goodbye. Live with the consequences." Guess who he placed the note on the table, setting his wedding ring on top. In his office, he opened the tool safe Linda always hated. He retrieved his .357 Colt Python, ammunition, some emergency cash, and their marriage certificate. Back in the kitchen, he tore the certificate into shreds and pinned the pieces to the wall with a knife. Adding a splash of ketchup over the display, he stepped back and muttered, "Perfect." Satisfied with his symbolic farewell, he packed his gear into his F-150, loading camping supplies, fishing gear, gas cans, and ammo. He left the fridge unplugged, its doors open, and slashed the power cord for good measure. Doubt crept in as he thought of his kids. "Am I doing the right thing?" he whispered. The silence offered no answers. Shaking off the hesitation, he climbed into the truck and drove away, leaving the house unlocked. The streets were empty as he drove into the night. By 1:30 a.m., he parked outside L.W. Stern's office. Too exhausted to think, he set his phone alarm for 8 a.m. and tried to sleep. When the alarm rang, Jim stretched, sipped his cold coffee, and dialed LL.W.S number. After a few rings, the lawyer answered. His steady voice offered a small measure of comfort. "LW, it's Jim," Jim began. "I need help. Can you meet me at your office? Bring a notary. I'll explain everything then." "What's going on?" LW asked, concern creeping into his tone. "Is Linda okay?" "Not over the phone," Jim replied, his voice tense. "Just trust me." "All right," LW said after a pause. "Give me an hour, and don't do anything reckless." "Thanks," Jim said before ending the call. 50 minutes later, LDW arrived in his Cadillac. Jim greeted him with a firm handshake and a thick stack of papers. Together, they headed upstairs. In the quiet office, LW turned on the coffee maker and motioned for Jim to sit. Jim laid everything out, recounting the events with icy precision. By the end, he wasn't crying anymore. The grief had solidified into something unyielding. LW listened intently, his face somber. When Jim finished, the older man sighed deeply. "What do you want to do?" he asked gently. Jim's gaze hardened. "Disappear," he said. "No divorce, no legal fights. Just vanish." "She left me without thinking twice. I'll do the same." "And your kids?" LW pressed. "What about them?" Jim's expression darkened. "What about them? Are they even mine? She's only cared about herself. Why should I care more than she does?" He exhaled sharply. "Set up a trust for my 401k and pension for the kids when they're 21. I'll sign power of attorney over to you so I never have to deal with her again. Can we make that happen?" After a long silence, LW finally broke the tension. "Yes, Jim, we can do this, but you need to understand the implications. She can file for divorce and claim abandonment. Notices might end up in the local paper, and after 2 years, the divorce would be finalized without your consent. But your kids, they'll never see you again. Your mother will be devastated. Are you sure this is the path you want to take? Have you even considered counseling?" Jim's expression answered louder than words, a mixture of defiance and cold resolve. Counseling? For what? He snapped bitterly. So she can shed some tears, beg for forgiveness, and tell me it didn't mean anything? That we can move past it if I just try hard enough? No, she made her choices. Let her deal with the fallout. Leaning forward, his fists clenched, his voice quivered with barely restrained anger. You know what I want? I want to wake up and find this was all some terrible dream. But it's not. And I won't sit in a room while some therapist lectures me about forgiveness or reminds me to think of the children. She's the one who destroyed this family, and I'm done. LW said nothing, letting the bitterness hang heavy in the air. Jim finally exhaled sharply, his tone dropping to a chilling calm. If my life is wrecked, hers will be too. LW sighed deeply, the weight of Jim's words evident in his weary expression. He wiped at the corners of his eyes as Jim straightened, his posture rigid. The atmosphere shifted as Penny Wilson, LW's assistant and a notary, cautiously entered the room. Picking up on the tension, she hesitated, but LW waved her in. Introductions were quick, and Penny left to gather her supplies, returning with a tablet and a cup of coffee. Together, she, LW, and Jim went through the legal documents, a separation agreement, power of attorney, and trust accounts for Jim's children with LW and Jim's mother as trustees. Every detail was painstakingly finalized and signed. When it was over, Jim handed over letters addressed to his children, to be opened on their birthdays. Standing, he shook hands with both LW and Penny. I'm sorry, Penny offered softly, her eyes filled with empathy. Jim nodded, his face unreadable. Inside he felt hollow, drained of everything but a strange, numbing emptiness. As he stepped out of LW's office, the overcast sky mirrored his mood. The heavy clouds no longer felt oppressive, but strangely fitting, a somber backdrop to his unraveling life. Jim drove straight to the bank, withdrawing most of his savings and leaving only a token amount in his checking account. He filled his truck's tank and auxiliary tank at a gas station, adding 2 jerry cans of fuel for good measure. His next stop was an internet cafe, where he uploaded letters addressed to his mother, her parents, and a few local news outlets. With methodical precision, he canceled their shared credit cards, reporting them as stolen to prevent Linda from using them further. The rain had slowed by the time Jim left the cafe, the gray skies of March over Cicero softening just enough to suggest a sliver of change. By 2 p.m., he was driving east, his destination unknown. After 7 hours on the road, he stopped at a roadside motel, where the restless churn of his thoughts kept him awake. The next morning, after another 6 hours behind the wheel, Jim arrived in Golden Beach, Maryland, a quiet riverside town on the Patuxent. The off-season stillness felt like a balm for his raw nerves. Parking near a small diner called Sally's, he stepped inside. A corkboard near the entrance caught his attention. Flyers for babysitting, dog walking, used cars, and rentals were pinned haphazardly. One ad stood out. Studio apartment. 1 bedroom, kitchenette, shower, quiet area, no smoking or drinking, $135 per month, cash up front, utilities and internet included, parking for 1 car, references preferred. For the first time in days, Jim felt a flicker of hope. The simplicity of the ad suggested a clean break, a chance to start over. He pulled the paper from the board and approached the counter, where a smiling older black woman in a waitress uniform stood. Her name tag read, Sally. "Well, hello there," she greeted warmly. "What can I get you?" Jim held up the flyer. "This still available?" Sally didn't look at the paper. Instead, she studied him with sharp but kind eyes. "Looking for a place to stay? What about work?" Jim hesitated. "Both, I guess." With a knowing nod, Sally pulled out her phone and dialed. After 2 rings, someone picked up. "Hey," she said, glancing at Jim. "I've got someone here you should meet. Looks respectable enough. Yeah, come by." She hung up and chuckled. "Don't worry, they're good people. Hungry? You've got time for a bite." "Sure," Jim replied. "Roast beef sandwich, salad with ranch, and sweet tea." "Coming right up," she said, disappearing into the kitchen. The food was better than expected. The roast beef was tender, the salad crisp, and a surprise side of coleslaw complemented the meal. Jim was on his 2nd glass of tea when the door creaked open, and 2 strangers walked in. One was a slender, athletic East Asian woman in her early 40s. The other, a tall, rugged man in his 60s, carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of a Marine. The man guided the woman to a seat on Jim's left before taking the stool to his right, removing his sunglasses and fixing Jim with an intense gaze. Jim smirked. "Don't be shy. Take a seat." The man didn't flinch, but the woman broke the tension with a warm smile. "Hello, I'm May Lowell, and this is my husband, Joshua. Say hello, Joshua." "Hello," Joshua muttered, his eyes not leaving Jim. May extended her hand, and Jim shook it. "What's your name, where are you from, and why are you here?" she asked bluntly. Jim hesitated but handed over his driver's license and a brief, vague explanation. "Are you married?" she pressed. "Yes," he admitted reluctantly. "Kids?" Jim's tone sharpened. "Yes, but I don't know where they are, and I don't care to. I've done nothing illegal. Morally questionable? Sure. But I'm not interested in justifying myself. If you don't like it, I'll leave." Joshua's deep voice broke the tension. "Enough, May." She fell silent, and Jim turned to Joshua, whose expression softened slightly, though his commanding presence remained. "The rent's $150 a month starting next month," Joshua stated. "It's clean and quiet, and the price won't change unless you break the deal. Interested? We'll show you the place, and we'll shake hands to seal it." "Shake hands?" Jim raised an eyebrow. "I'm a man of my word," Joshua replied evenly. After a pause, Jim nodded. "Let's see it." He paid for his meal, just over $5, and left a generous tip for Sally. She nodded in approval as he followed the Lowells outside. Joshua exchanged brief words with two sheriff's deputies getting coffee, then led May to a gleaming black Jeep Rubicon Sahara. Helping her into the passenger seat, he murmured something before shutting the door and motioning for Jim to follow. It was the first time Jim had seen Joshua crack a smile. The image lingered in Jim's mind as the grin faded and Joshua's face turned serious again. Sliding into his Jeep, Joshua cast a glance at Jim before pulling away. Jim followed in his truck, the Marine Corps and American flag decals on the Jeep's rear window guiding him through the winding roads. A faded Vietnamese flag from the 1970s hinted at stories Joshua had yet to tell. After about 12 minutes, they turned down a secluded drive that opened to a cluster of raised bungalows perched near the water. The quiet marina stretched into the distance, the tranquil scene a stark contrast to the chaos Jim had left behind. They stopped in front of a modest blue cottage with crisp white shutters near the riverbank. Jim parked, stepping out to examine the sturdy ramp and stairs leading to a wide veranda. The Lowells took the stairs, while Jim opted for the ramp, appreciating its solid craftsmanship. At the top, Joshua unlocked the door and gestured for Jim to step inside. The interior radiated simplicity and calm. For the first time in what felt like forever, Jim felt a small flicker of hope. A narrow hallway led into the home. On one side was a small but functional kitchen, on the other a bathroom with a shower. At the end of the hall, a bedroom overlooked the river, while a cozy living room offered views of the wooded hills. Shuttered windows opened to a wraparound veranda that made the modest home feel larger. A ceiling fan turned lazily in both the living room and bedroom, and a freestanding wood stove in the corner provided the only source of heat. Though minimal, the space was insulated well, and the low ceilings made it feel snug. At roughly 1,200 square feet, it felt like the perfect retreat. "Not for me," Jim thought grimly, forcing himself to refocus. "I'll take it," he said, turning to Joshua. Joshua raised a hand, stopping him. "Not so fast. How are you paying? Do you have a job?" "Not yet. What do you have available?" Jim countered. Joshua studied him, his sharp gaze piercing. After a moment, he exchanged a look with May before speaking. "What can you do?" "I'm a licensed aircraft mechanic, decent at woodworking, and I know my way around a forklift," Jim replied evenly. Joshua nodded, the assessment clearly improving in his mind. "All right, minimum wage, cash, under the table. You'll work at the Hideaway Marina, wear a branded t-shirt, and pair it with jeans. Occasionally, local churches or charities might need an extra hand. They'll pay cash too, but let me be clear. If you exploit anyone's generosity, you're out. Got it?" Jim smirked faintly. "Understood, boss." Joshua extended a hand. "Be at the Marina restaurant at sunrise. Come half an hour early if you want breakfast. Let's see what you're made of. Agreed?" "Agreed," Jim replied, shaking his hand. That handshake marked a pivotal shift in Jim's life. Over the coming months, he learned more about the Lowells. Joshua had been a Marine scout during the Vietnam War, rescuing May and her family from dire circumstances. They were relocated to the Philippines before eventually resettling in the United States with the help of Catholic charities. Joshua, captivated by May's strength and spirit, stayed in touch after his return stateside. Years later, he formally reconnected with her in Oceanside, California. Despite resistance from his family, Joshua converted to Catholicism and they married. The couple moved to Paris Island, where Joshua continued his military career, climbing the ranks to infantry sergeant major. His distinguished service included Operation Desert Storm and an unnamed mission he refused to discuss. Together, they raised 4 children, all of whom pursued military careers. Their daughter, a Naval Academy graduate, later became a lawyer and began dating a Baltimore pediatrician. For Jim, life with the Lowells provided stability. He adapted to the mild Maryland climate and honed his woodworking and mechanical skills while keeping his aircraft mechanic license active. Over time, he became a fixture in the community and earned Joshua's respect. Eventually, he secured a formal job at the marina, earning nearly $20 an hour, and began to feel like part of the Lowell family. Jim even started a small construction business, hiring a veteran and an ex-convict to help with renovations. Together, they built a reputation for quality craftsmanship. He grew close to the Lowell children and, by his 3rd year, felt truly integrated into their lives. Still, the scars of his past lingered. Sharing his story with the Lowells brought understanding, but no closure. May was aghast when she heard about Linda. "How could someone do that to their own kids?" she exclaimed, catching herself quickly. "I'm sorry, Jim. That was insensitive." Jim's face darkened. "I care about my kids, May, but I can't even be sure they're mine. Believing that would mean trusting her." May offered a gentle smile. "I understand. I'm sorry." Joshua, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "You're broken, son. No judgment here. Life kicked you when you were down, and you took the only road you saw. But you're still broken, and you've done nothing to fix it." Though the anger had dulled over time, Jim knew Joshua was right. 3 years with the Lowells had given him a semblance of peace, but the bitterness still clung to him, holding him back. He thought he was healing, but deep down, he was trapped. That began to change one Sunday morning when Jim, leaving the grocery store, saw a young woman struggling in the parking lot. 2 men were maltreating her as she fought to get into her Toyota Supra. Her screams pierced the air, but no one else seemed to notice or care. Jim dropped his bags on the hood of his truck and charged toward them, snapping open the folding baton he carried for protection. "Hey!" he shouted, drawing their attention. The men turned, and Jim spotted a tool in one of their hands. Instinct took over. He swung the baton, cracking the man's wrist with a sickening snap. The tool clattered to the ground as Jim shoved the injured man into his accomplice, slamming them both against the car. The first doubled over in pain, clutching his wrist, while the second groaned, holding his ribs as they crumpled to the ground. The woman, still crying, frantically tried to open the back door. Jim realized why when he saw a small child strapped in the car seat. Grabbing his phone, he called Michael Lowell. "Mike, I need backup. Grocery store parking lot, possible robbery, or worse." "Stay put, we're on our way," Michael replied. Jim secured the scene, keeping the men on the ground until help arrived. When Michael and his partner arrived, weapons drawn, Jim handed over the tool and explained what had happened. The woman, who introduced herself as Emma Lindell, thanked him tearfully. She and her daughter were shaken, but unharmed. For the first time in years, Jim felt like he'd made a difference. Later, as Emma invited him to lunch at Sally's, Jim hesitated, but agreed. For the first time in a long while, he felt a spark of something unfamiliar: hope. After locking his groceries in the truck, they walked to Sally's. Stepping inside the cool diner, Jim felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Sally spotted them as they entered and waved toward an open table. The ever-cheerful hostess greeted them warmly, a rare exception to her usual practice of reserving tables for her regulars. "Are you two here for the hero discount?" she teased with a grin. Jim blinked in confusion, but Emma giggled. "Word travels fast, huh, Sally?" "Mike mentioned the incident on the radio," Sally said, chuckling. "Looks like Mr. Nice Guy here is already famous." "Well done, Jim. I knew you were one of the good ones." Jim felt a wave of embarrassment as Sally continued to enjoy herself at his expense. Small-town life, he realized, came with its own brand of fame. 2 older men entered the diner, greeting Sally before noticing Jim and Emma. One removed his Vietnam veteran cap and approached. "Good job, young man," he said, extending his hand. "It's good to see someone step up. Heard one of them had a tool." Jim shook the man's hand, taken aback by the warm reception. The second man added, "Joshua always had a good eye for character." He shook Jim's hand briefly, nodded to Emma and Linda, and headed to the counter. Sally beamed, clearly pleased. "Looks like you're the talk of the town," she said. "This place just became the official home of our newest hero." Emma laughed. "Sally, can we just get dinner before his head inflates?" Sally recommended the Tuesday special: grilled chicken, fries, spinach, and a side salad. Jim nodded, and Emma added an order for mac and cheese and chicken nuggets for Linda, who smiled faintly before retreating to her quiet observation of Jim. As Sally headed to the kitchen, Emma turned to Jim. "Did you know Camille and her sister-in-law were trying to set us up? Apparently, they think you need saving." Jim raised an eyebrow. "Saving?" "They thought meeting me might help with your recovery," Emma said. "Not that I'm looking for romance. My focus is my daughter, but I guess fate had other ideas." She smiled and shifted gears. "So, Mr. Carlyle, let me tell you about myself. I'm 29, divorced for 3 years. My ex-husband was abusive, went to prison, and passed away last year. My sister handled the divorce. It was one of her first cases." Emma's voice softened as she glanced at Linda, clearly mindful of her words. "I'm a licensed accountant specializing in estate planning and investments. I co-own a firm with my best friend and a notary secretary, and business has been great." Her tone changed, breaking as she added, "But today, those men, it was terrifying." Her composure crumbled, and tears spilled down her cheeks as the reality of the ordeal hit her. Without hesitation, Jim moved to her side, crouched beside her chair, and embraced her. The act felt natural. Linda began to cry too, and Jim gently pulled her into the hug. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of connection and normalcy. It was both comforting and terrifying. Sally returned, her usual smile replaced with concern. Silently, she set iced tea and apple juice on the table. Jim tried to explain, but Emma interrupted between sobs. "It's just everything hitting me at once." Sally nodded knowingly and walked away. As Jim returned to his seat, Sally's usual grin reappeared, and she winked at him. Jim straightened his shirt, took a sip of tea, and finally spoke. "Emma, I need to explain something. When you introduced yourself and Linda, I froze. Your names are the same as my ex-wife's and daughter's, just reversed. It threw me off." Emma nodded, encouraging him to continue. Jim took a deep breath and shared his story, recounting the betrayal, his departure, and the years of pain that followed. He avoided the harshest details, but didn't shy away from the truth. "I'm not proud of how I handled things," he admitted. "But at the time, I didn't see another option. Talking about it now, though, it feels like a weight is lifting. I know it sounds cliché, but it's true." Emma listened intently, her expression shifting as she processed his words. Finally, she placed a hand on his. "Jim, I'm sorry for everything you've been through, but you need to heal. Trust me, I've been there. It's not easy, but it's possible." Dinner arrived, and they ate while talking casually about life in Golden Beach. Emma explained she'd lived there for 4 years, moving after her husband's arrest. Linda, now 5, had grown up in the town. As the meal ended, Emma gathered her things and extended her hand to Jim. "Thank you again for everything," she said warmly. Her handshake lingered slightly longer than necessary, leaving Jim with a feeling he couldn't quite name. Emma smiled as she left with Linda, walking out the door. Jim stood for a moment, then sat back down, realizing with a chuckle that she had left him the bill. "This little trickster," he muttered, amused. Sally approached, holding the receipt. "Don't ruin it, sweetheart," she teased. "She's a keeper, worth the wait." Jim paid the bill and left the diner, feeling something he hadn't in years, genuine satisfaction. It was a faint but undeniable spark of something close to happiness. Weeks turned into months, and Jim crossed paths with Emma often. They even shared a few outings for ice cream with Linda. Slowly, Jim began to feel more like himself again. One Thursday morning, Jim learned about a barbecue at the Lowells' home the following evening and was invited to join. Grateful, he decided to take Saturday off, anticipating a long night of food, drink, and conversation. On Friday, Jim stuck to his usual routine: breakfast at the Marina restaurant, launching and servicing boats, and wrapping up work by late afternoon. After heading home to clean up, he put on a fresh t-shirt and jeans and drove to the Lowells' house, a sprawling log-style ranch with a wraparound deck, patio, pool, jacuzzi, and smoking barbecue pits. Mai greeted him warmly with a quick hug and kiss on the cheek before ushering him into the lively gathering. Children ran around while family and friends mingled. Before long, Jim found himself face-to-face with May Angelina, the youngest Lowell child. Angie, as everyone called her, was a sharp and well-regarded attorney, a former Marine Corps officer, and the subject of family hopes that her relationship with a young doctor would turn serious. Despite her social clout, she directed her full attention to Jim. "Jim," she began, her tone direct but kind, "how are you doing? I haven't seen much of you over the past 3 years, but what I know and have observed leaves a good impression. That said, someone is very interested in you. Can we talk?" Surprised, Jim agreed hesitantly. "Where?" "Now, if you're free," she said, taking his hand. Before he could respond, Mike and Camille joined them, grinning as if in on a joke. They led Jim to a shaded table beneath a large tree, offering warm handshakes and a round of drinks. Budweiser for Jim and Mike, white wine for the women. Mike handed Jim a beer. "You might need this, but pace yourself." Jim nodded, taking a sip as Angie leaned forward, her expression serious. "About a year and a half ago, I was given an assignment," she began. Jim wasn't surprised. Angie's Marine background and connection to her father suggested who might have orchestrated this. His suspicions grew as he glanced at Joshua, deep in conversation with other guests, his gaze briefly flicking toward Emma before returning to the group. "I've been in contact with L.W. Stearns," Angie continued. "Don't worry, he didn't disclose anything you hadn't already shared, but he confirmed your story and filled in a few gaps." She paused, her tone softening. "I'm the only one who knows all the details so far, not even my parents." At that moment, her boyfriend Robert approached, planting a kiss on her head. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes, dear. I'll fill you in later," she replied warmly, sending him back to the party with a smile. Turning back to Jim, she said, "Now, here's the truth. After you left, Linda thought you'd cool off and come back. But when she found the house, she panicked. Thinking you might have injured yourself, she called emergency. Police arrived to find her hysterical. When they entered the house, they discovered the chaos and scolded her for wasting their time." Angie took a sip of wine, her voice steady. "Her parents arrived and were furious, at her recklessness and at you for disappearing. Meanwhile, the messages and emails you sent went viral, humiliating Linda. She delayed filing for divorce, spent the money you left, and drowned in debt. Nearly 2 years passed before the divorce was finalized. You've been legally free for 6 months." Jim sat silently, processing the cascade of revelations. Angie continued. "Linda sold the house, lost her job, started drinking heavily, and fell into bad company. Her parents took custody of the kids. Your mother sees them regularly, but Linda, not so much. Last week, she entered rehab. Her parents are exhausted, her mother's health is failing, and her father's stress is through the roof." The mood grew heavy as Joshua and Mai joined the group. Joshua's tone was firm as he addressed Jim. "Son, everyone knows now, your family, her family. Mai and I don't know the full story yet, but it's time to stop avoiding it. This isn't just about you anymore. There are others involved, people who care about you." Jim exhaled deeply, the weight of his decisions and their consequences pressing down on him. The road ahead seemed daunting, but for the first time, he felt he might not have to face it alone. As Emma appeared nearby, Jim couldn't help but wonder how much longer his fragile peace would last. His carefully rebuilt life suddenly felt precarious. "How haven't they found me yet?" he thought. "I re-registered my truck, got a new license, and even pay taxes. It's not like I've been hiding." Mike shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I might have helped with that," he admitted, blushing. "When you updated your registration and license, I pulled a few strings at the DMV. Your paperwork got lost, and any searches just didn't get reviewed." He looked at the ground, clearly embarrassed. Mai Angelina sighed softly. "LW filed your taxes for the first 2 years, so you owe him for that. Last year, you did it yourself, and it was fine. Honestly, no one's looking for you, except maybe your mom. She's worried and angry at everyone, everything, but not herself. She doesn't seem to take any responsibility for what's happened." "Sorry, Jim, but that's just the truth." Emma stepped closer, resting her hand on Jim's shoulder. Her gray eyes met his, and he managed a small smile. A surge of emotions ran through him. Not fear, but the realization that he was free and surrounded by people who genuinely cared. "I've grown up," he thought. "It's time to stop running." Joshua's firm voice interrupted his thoughts. "Son, the time for running is over." Jim nodded. "You're right, sir. No more running. It's time to move forward." He turned to Emma. "Do you think someone could watch Linda while we take a walk?" Emma glanced at the group. Camille immediately stood. "I've got her. Take your time." Emma smiled gratefully, then took Jim's hand and led him away. Mai hugged Jim briefly before sitting back down to debrief her parents on the conversation that had just unfolded. Emma and Jim followed a narrow path leading away from the house, the forest closing in around them. 15 minutes later, They arrived at a fallen tree by the riverbank, a secluded spot to sit and talk. Emma smoothed her dress and sat gracefully, motioning for Jim to join her. "Come on," she said, patting the tree trunk. Jim hesitated before sitting beside her, his eyes darting around nervously. Emma leaned back, closed her eyes, and smiled serenely. Her calm unnerved him. It felt like she already knew how this would end, as if this moment was exactly as she'd planned. Finally, Jim gathered his thoughts. "Emma, you need to know everything," he began. "I need to tell you my whole story." Emma opened her eyes and met his gaze. "I'm listening." Jim recounted the painful details of his past, his betrayal, the choices he'd made, and how he'd spent the last 3 years adrift. He described the shame and loss, how he'd avoided mirrors and how lost he'd felt. He shared what Angie had revealed earlier and admitted how their first encounter had started to bring him back to life. By the end, he felt exposed, bracing for Emma's reaction. Instead of anger or pity, Emma's eyes sparkled with amusement. She burst into laughter. "So," she teased, "you're telling me you're the honorable type? Because, honestly, you've been nothing but honorable since the day we met." Her admiration was unmistakable, and her grin carried a hint of affection. Jim, caught off guard, hesitated before taking her hands in his. "I'm thinking about asking Angie to contact LW, he said. "I want to see if I can get custody of my kids. Linda's in rehab, unemployed, and her parents are raising the children. I don't know where I stand legally, but I can't imagine it's worse than her position." He continued, "I want to bring my kids here, to my life now. My mom deserves time with her grandchildren too, but first I need to build a house big enough for everyone." Emma blinked, clearly surprised. "You want to do all of that?" she asked softly. "And do you have feelings for me?" Jim smiled. "Yeah, I think I do. I care about you and Linda, and I think you could be part of this family I want to rebuild." Emma's grin widened. "So you're saying you love me, or that you could?" "I think it's possible," Jim admitted. Then, gathering his courage, he kissed her. It wasn't dramatic, just simple and sincere, but to Emma it felt like a promise. "You're mine," she said softly, smiling. "And I'm yours." She continued with renewed determination. "I know an architect who can help us design your house, and we'll have Angie start the custody process with LW. Don't worry about legal fees, we'll figure that out later." Jim nodded, overwhelmed but hopeful. Without another word, he pulled her into a hug, their laughter mingling with the rustling leaves. 45 minutes later, they returned to the party, brushing off leaves and grass. Emma's cheeks were flushed, and Jim's grin was wider than it had been in years. Over the next few days, plans began to take shape. Angie contacted LW to start the custody case. Jim met with Joshua to discuss purchasing land and designing a house with space for his children and an addition for his mother. He even offered his current home to Linda's parents if they wanted to stay close. For the first time in years, Jim felt like his life had direction. With Emma by his side, he was ready to face the future. Emma accompanied Jim to meet the architect, where they discussed their plans. The architect provided insightful suggestions and estimates, which pleasantly surprised Jim with their affordability. The following Monday, Jim applied for a construction loan, while Angie reached out to LW and one of his associates to outline the custody case. LW advised that Jim would likely need to return to Illinois for the court proceedings. With nearly 4 weeks of accrued vacation, Joshua assured him, "Take as much time as you need. Family comes first." Meanwhile, Angie crafted a strategic twist for the case, collaborating with LW through video calls and emails. Jim and Emma's relationship continued to deepen, though Jim remained cautious. In contrast, 5-year-old Linda showed no such restraint, clinging to Jim's hand, laughing more freely, and demanding goodnight hugs and kisses. Her boldness peaked one day when she asked, "When are you going to marry my mom? I'm getting old and I need a dad." Jim couldn't help but laugh at her precociousness. When the court case began, it went smoother than Jim had feared. Though some of his actions raised moral questions, they weren't illegal. Linda's parents supported his plans, and Jim sweetened the deal by offering to let them live with him and the children. Angie and LW delivered the news, explaining Jim believed they wouldn't want to speak with him directly. To Jim's surprise, his former in-laws were eager to reconcile, expressing regret and support. In the meantime, Jim's life continued to improve. His small construction business thrived, and his home was rapidly taking shape. Within weeks, the foundation, floors, and roof were completed, and by the second month, the house stood finished. Emma, Linda, Mai, Angelina, Camille, and even Sally helped decorate, turning it into a welcoming home. When Jim received notice of the court date, Linda had just completed rehab and was struggling to rebuild her life. LW began selling her house to avoid foreclosure. Jim packed his truck, said heartfelt goodbyes to Emma and his newfound family, and drove to Cicero. Angie promised to join him for the trial. Returning to his hometown felt surreal. His old house was in disrepair. Overgrown grass, a dented garage door, and boarded-up windows spoke of neglect. Jim bypassed it, heading instead to his mother's apartment. She met him at the door with tears streaming down her face, hugging him fiercely. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. Her radiant smile melted away his guilt. She pulled him inside, carried his bags to the guest room, and returned with coffee. "LW will be here soon," she said. "For now, I just want to look at you." 2 hours later, LW arrived with Penny Wilson. After introductions, they discussed the case. Angie would arrive Friday, and the trial was set for Monday. LW described the judge as strict but fair, emphasizing the need for a solid argument. "He doesn't tolerate betrayal, but also frowns on fathers who abandon their families," LW warned. On Friday, Jim picked Angie up from the airport. She greeted him warmly, bringing much-needed levity. During the ride back, she updated him on her research and support from her fiancé, Robert Taylor. The next day, the legal team gathered to finalize their strategy. Angie's research added confidence, but Jim couldn't shake the feeling something was being withheld. LW reassured him, "You're just nervous. Everything is fine." Monday morning was crisp and clear as Jim arrived at the courthouse. LW, Angie, and Penny were waiting outside courtroom 319. As they exchanged greetings, the elevator doors opened and Linda stepped out with her lawyers. Dee and Jane accompanied her. Linda's once beautiful face was now pale and gaunt, her features weathered by time and hardship. She spotted Jim but was restrained by her companions. Angie whispered, "She looks rough." Jim's reply was sharp. "Pity, huh?" Moments later, the elevator opened again, revealing Jim's mother and Linda's parents. His mother hugged him tightly, followed by Linda's mom, whose warmth surprised him. Then Linda's father extended his hand. Jim hesitated before shaking it, blurting, "Linda just went in." Linda's father smiled. "We're here for you, son," she had her chance. "Now it's your turn. Just be polite." Overwhelmed, Jim pulled the older man into a bear hug. "Thank you, Dad." Together, Jim and his group entered the courtroom. He took his place at the plaintiff's table with Linda's parents and his mother seated behind him. A few other spectators, including 2 bored-looking reporters, dotted the gallery. Linda and her legal team sat at the defense table, occasionally casting glances toward Jim's side. At 9:05, the bailiff called the court to order. "All rise for the Honorable Thomas Kincaid, Family Court Judge. The court is now in session. Case 213, James R. Carlisle v. Linda Kramer for custody of 2 minor children, Emma Louise Carlisle, age 12, and Thomas James Carlisle, age 9. Issues of child and spousal support are also on the table. Please be seated." Judge Kincaid took his seat, rapped his gavel once, and addressed the room. "Are all interested parties present?" Linda's lawyer stood. "Linda Kramer, defendant, Your Honor. John Schultz, representing Miss Kramer." "Louis W. Stearns for plaintiff James Carlisle, Your Honor," LW responded confidently. The judge glanced at his notes. "This appears to be a custody case involving 2 minor children and permission for an out-of-state move. Miss Kramer, is that accurate?" Linda stood. "Yes, Your Honor. My ex-husband thinks I'm unfit and wants to take my children away." The judge's expression grew stern. "And you 2 are divorced, correct?" "Yes, Your Honor," Linda confirmed. "May I ask why you divorced?" Jim tensed, ready to respond, but LW placed a firm hand on his arm. "Not yet," he whispered. Linda's voice quivered as she began. "We had been out dancing at Morrison's. It was a difficult month and we were trying to celebrate. Jim and I argued and he—" "Objection!" LW interjected sharply, rising from his seat. The judge frowned. "On what grounds?" "Miss Kramer's statement is misleading, Your Honor," LW replied evenly. Schultz stood, his tone defensive. "Your Honor, this is unnecessary. These details have no bearing on the case." The judge deliberated for a moment. "Objection sustained. However, Miss Kramer hasn't been sworn in yet, so we'll proceed cautiously. Miss Kramer, let's get to the facts. What really happened that night?" Linda faltered, her pale face betraying her distress. I can't," she stammered. "It's not what you think." Schultz quickly rose again. "Your Honor, I object to any insinuations about my client's personal life. These allegations are irrelevant." LW smiled, his confidence unshaken. Angie exchanged a knowing glance with him. The judge raised an eyebrow. Miss Kramer, are there allegations of misconduct here? Please clarify. Linda shrank further into her seat, visibly shaking. Turning to LW, the judge asked, "Can Mr. Carlyle shed light on this matter?" LW nodded. Jim rose, his voice steady. "Swear me in, Your Honor, I'll explain." "Objection, Your Honor," Schultz shouted, his frustration evident. "This is a one-sided account and should be excluded." "Objection overruled," the judge ruled firmly. "Bailiff, swear in the witness." The bailiff approached Jim, holding a Bible. "Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand," the bailiff instructed. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," Jim responded firmly. "State your name and address for the record," the bailiff continued. "James Carlyle," Jim replied. "Hideaway Marina, Golden Beach, Maryland." The judge nodded. "Proceed, Mr. Carlyle. What happened that night?" Jim took a deep breath and recounted the events in detail, from leaving the house to Linda disappearing after heading to the restroom. He described how she left without explanation and spent the night with another man. "She didn't say a word, didn't explain. She just left," he concluded, looking directly at Linda. "So I went home and did the same. At least I left a note." The courtroom fell silent except for Linda's quiet sobbing. Then she erupted. "You abandoned me and the kids, you coward!" Jim's reply was calm but cutting. "Just like you abandoned me." The judge banged his gavel twice. "Order. Any more outbursts, and I will take action." Turning to Linda, he asked, "Is Mr. Carlyle's account accurate?" Tears streamed down her face as she hesitated, the truth visibly crushing her. "Yes, Your Honor," she whispered. "Everything he said is true. I ruined everything." The judge turned his attention back to Jim. "While I sympathize with your situation, leaving your family for nearly 4 years is a serious issue." Jim opened his mouth to respond, but Angie stood, pulling him back to his seat. "Your Honor, may I address the court?" "And you are?" the judge asked. "Maya Angelina Lowell, Mr. Carlyle's lawyer from Maryland," Angie replied. "There are people here who can provide additional context." The judge nodded, and Joshua Lowell stood. "Your Honor, I've known Jim for 4 years. When he arrived, he was broken, but he's rebuilt himself. He's proven his integrity and character." One by one, others spoke on Jim's behalf. Joshua's family, Sally from the diner, and finally, Emma Lindell. Emma described how Jim had saved her and her daughter during a carjacking, calling him a man of honor. "This case is part of his healing process," she concluded. "I love him, Your Honor." Linda muttered angrily, prompting another sharp gavel strike. The judge ordered a recess, scheduling the hearing to resume at 2 p.m. As the court emptied, Jim turned to Emma, his voice low. "So you love me?" Emma blushed. "Yes, and now you know." Jim smiled. "Good, because I love you too." Jim held Emma's hands and kissed her gently. Turning back toward the group, they were met with smiles, laughter, and a few blushes from their friends and family. Together, they walked to a nearby steakhouse for lunch. The atmosphere at the table was light and celebratory. Jim's legal team was in high spirits, particularly Angie, who basked in the success of assembling his strong support network. LW leaned over to her and said, "If you ever get tired of Maryland, give me a call. I'd be happy to find you a place in my firm." By 1:45, they returned to the courthouse to chaos on the defense's side. Linda was missing. Her legal team scrambled to explain her disappearance, presenting signed and notarized documents where Linda conceded to all of Jim's claims and waived her parental rights. Jim sat in stunned silence as LW and Angie explained. "What does this mean legally?" Jim asked. LW replied, "It means you won, son. She's relinquished everything. You're already divorced. This was just the rest." Angie placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's over, Jim. Move forward. There's nothing holding you back now." "It's really over," Jim murmured, trying to process the finality. "But at what cost?" His next steps loomed, picking up his children from school. They were unaware of the day's developments, but their lives were about to change. 2 reporters loitered nearby, but LW intercepted them, promising a statement later. "That should keep them busy for a day or two," he chuckled. "Hopefully something more newsworthy comes along." When Jim arrived at the school with Emma and Linda's parents, his children spilled out of the building, chatting and laughing. Spotting their grandparents, they ran toward them, but froze when they saw Jim. Their hesitation lasted only a moment before they erupted into excited shouts. "Daddy, Daddy!" they cried, rushing to hug him. "Where have you been? Why didn't you call? Where's Mom?" Jim embraced them tightly, emotions flooding him. Emma stood at a respectful distance, watching quietly. After a moment, Jim introduced her. "Kids, this is Mrs. Lindell. She's a good friend of mine." The children studied her curiously before Jim suggested, "How about we head to your grandparents' house for lunch? You can meet some of my other friends." They agreed eagerly, piling into the grandparents' car. At the house, they joined a lively backyard gathering. After lunch, the tone shifted as Jim called everyone together for an important talk. Taking a deep breath, he began, "Kids, your mom has left. I don't know where she is, but we'll try to find her. For now, she's gone." His daughter frowned but didn't look surprised. It became clear that Linda's absences had been frequent. Jim continued, "I went to court for custody and your grandparents supported me. I won. Now you have a choice. You can live with me or you can stay here with your grandparents." His daughter spoke first. "She cheated on you, didn't she, Dad? There were different men all the time. It was gross," Tommy added bluntly. "Mark was the worst." The heavy silence was broken only by Emma stepping closer to Jim and squeezing his hand. Tommy looked at her and asked, "Is she your friend?" Jim hesitated, his cheeks flushing. "Yes, she is." Emma stumbled slightly, bumping into him, which made little Emma giggle. "Oh yeah, she's definitely his friend," she teased. The conversation lightened as little Emma introduced herself. "My name's Emma, too." "Emmeline," Big Emma replied with a smile. "But my friends call me Emma." "I like it," little Emma said. "My real name is Emily, but everyone calls me Emma." The interaction brought a much-needed moment of levity. Tommy, watching closely, turned to Jim. "She's suitable, Dad. What do you think?" Jim smiled, caught off guard by his son's maturity. "I think so, too." Over the next 2 days, Jim shared his plans with his family. He proposed that everyone move to Maryland, selling their current homes for a fresh start. The children were excited, especially knowing that their grandparents would join them. Surprisingly, the grandparents agreed, believing a new environment would be good for everyone. Preparations began quickly. Linda's continued absence made logistics simpler, though emotions ran high. Jim's mother held a garage sale and donated items to charity while Linda's parents packed and listed their home for sale. With all the paperwork finalized, the convoy set off. Jim's father-in-law drove the children and Jim and his mother shared the moving truck. After 3 days of travel, they arrived in Golden Beach. The kids explored their new home, thrilled to pick out bedrooms, while the grandparents admired their nearby house. Mai and Camille welcomed them warmly, handing over the keys and giving a tour. As everyone settled in, Jim returned home to find Emma chatting with the children. His daughter greeted him with a playful glare. "So, do I get a sister along with a new mom?" Jim blinked, caught off guard. Maybe? Did I forget to mention that?" She laughed and hugged him. "Thanks, Dad," Tommy added dryly. "Now I see why we needed so many bedrooms." In mid-August, Jim and Emma married in a small ceremony. Their honeymoon in New Orleans was simple and sweet, filled with quiet moments and good food. They returned to Golden Beach ready to embrace their new life. Linda remained missing, but Jim's life was moving forward. With the love and support of his new family, Jim had rebuilt the life he thought he'd lost. Was he happy? Yes. Had he made the right choices? Maybe. But he was grateful, and for Jim, that was enough.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My name is Caleb, and I've often felt like the forgotten son in my family. Growing up, I always felt like an outsider in my own home. My younger brother, Liam, was the golden child, the one my parents were always proud of and loved showing off. They'd call him their golden boy, while I was just me. Mom and Dad made it clear who their favorite was. Liam was the athlete, the charming kid with a bright future, and he soaked up all their praise. Meanwhile, I often felt invisible. Looking back, the favoritism was clear even before we hit grade school. If I brought home a good report card, they'd barely acknowledge it. But if Liam scored a goal in his Little League game, they'd throw a party and make a big deal of it, while I sat there eating stale cake, feeling like I didn't belong. Things got worse as we got older. When Liam turned 16, he got a brand new Ford for his birthday, a car my dad had obsessed over for months. As for me, I had to scrape together my own money for an old junker that barely ran, working weekends at a local hardware store. Liam's gas money was handed to him, no questions asked. When it came time for college, my parents didn't offer a single dime of help. I had to figure everything out on my own, taking out loans and working late nights just to cover my bills. I was burning the candle at both ends just to stay afloat. Then, during my sophomore year, I hit a rough patch. I was behind on rent, juggling overdue bills, and the stress was overwhelming. Swallowing my pride, I went to my parents and asked if they could help me out, even just a little. But they turned me down, saying they'd already spent a lot on Liam, who, by the way, was heading off to a private college. It cost them a small fortune. "We can't afford to help both of you," my dad said, as if it were obvious. They told me I'd be fine. "You're strong, Caleb. You'll figure it out." And somehow, I did, thanks to a few close friends who loaned me what they could. I managed to stay in college and eventually graduate. After everything that had happened, I was really hoping to leave it all behind, like a bad dream. Little did I know, life had more betrayal in store. After college, I landed a decent job at a tech startup. The pay wasn't great, but the experience was invaluable. It was the kind of job where I learned something new every day, and the people there quickly became like a second family. My colleague Mike, in particular, helped me a lot in those first couple of years. Mike was the one who introduced me to Chloe at a company event. She was unlike anyone I'd ever met, and we clicked instantly. Within a year, we were married. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had someone on my side, someone who believed in me for who I truly was. A few months after the wedding, I got a call from my mom. I almost didn't pick up. I'd grown used to the idea that they didn't care much about me. But something made me answer, and when I did, my mom sounded different, warmer. She said they missed me and wanted to know how I was doing. I kept my guard up, but when she started talking about fixing the past and rebuilding our family, I felt my defenses start to slip. She even sounded hurt that I hadn't told them about my wedding. "Caleb," she said softly, with a hint of guilt, "we want to be part of your life. Chloe's family now too." I'm not proud to admit it, but I bought into it. I wanted to believe they could change, that they had finally realized how they treated me and wanted to make things right. Chloe was excited at the idea of meeting them, and I thought maybe this could be our fresh start. So, we visited a couple of times. But each time, I couldn't shake the feeling that things hadn't really changed. Liam still lived with my parents. He didn't have a job, didn't contribute to rent, and only helped out occasionally at the family's small cafe. He was still the same entitled kid who never had to lift a finger for anything. But when they visited our place, it was a different story. Chloe and I were living in a modest apartment, saving every penny we could for the future. We didn't have anything fancy, just a used couch, a tiny TV, and a kitchen so small that only one person could fit at a time. I was working hard to save up for a down payment on a car, hoping Chloe and I could have something decent for our weekend drives. I was also saving for a new laptop since mine was on its last legs. Then, Chloe got pregnant. When she told me, it felt like my entire world lit up. I couldn't believe it, me, about to be a dad. I was ready to do whatever it took to give our kid the best life I could manage. But even in my joy, something about Chloe started to bother me. She became unusually close to my family, more so than I'd expected. I'd come home after long hours at work, and she'd mention spending the day at my parents' house or running errands with Liam. It seemed like every time I turned around, she was texting them or making plans to visit, often without even telling me beforehand. At first, I thought it was nice that she was making an effort with my family, but soon, it just felt strange. As Chloe's pregnancy neared its end, I could barely focus. Every time I walked through the door, there was something else to trigger that unsettling feeling in my gut. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that maybe she was just excited to be part of a family, but deep down, I knew I was fooling myself. Finally, one night, I couldn't take it anymore. While Chloe was asleep, I grabbed her phone, my hands shaking and my heart pounding. I told myself I just needed a quick look to prove my doubts wrong, but I didn't even need to dig far. The messages were right there, plain as day. Chloe had been seeing my brother, Liam, going back to when we first started visiting my parents. As I read through the texts, I realized it was worse than I ever imagined. Chloe had been sleeping with Liam for months. In some of the messages, she even talked about wanting to have his child, about how they could make it look like it was mine, and that I would never know. I sat there in shock, scrolling through their plans. She was planning to pin the child on me to get alimony while living this twisted little life with Liam, my own wife, my own brother. I barely remember the moments that followed. I just remember the blur of anger, hurt, and betrayal as I woke her up, demanding answers. She didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she exploded in anger, calling me paranoid and accusing me of snooping and being controlling. I yelled, desperate for some kind of explanation, but she shut down. Then, she packed a bag, stormed out of the apartment, and went straight to my parents' house. I sat there for hours, staring at the walls, feeling everything I had worked for crumble around me. Eventually, I grabbed my phone and called my parents, thinking they'd understand how insane this situation was. But when Mom answered, her tone was cold, almost dismissive. As I tried to explain what Chloe had done, she interrupted me, saying, "Caleb, I don't know what you're going on about, but you need to calm down. Chloe has told us everything." "Everything?" I asked, barely able to comprehend her words. "She's sleeping with Liam. She's carrying his child." "Stop it, Caleb," she said sharply, as if I were a child. "You're always making drama. Chloe is here with us, and she's absolutely devastated. You drove her away with your possessiveness, and Liam has been nothing but supportive of her during this difficult time." "Supportive?" I choked out, confused. "Mom, Liam was having an affair with my wife." "Liam wouldn't do that to you," she snapped. "And if you hadn't been so unstable, maybe Chloe wouldn't have felt the need to look for comfort elsewhere. But you always had to be the victim, didn't you?" I hung up, feeling utterly shattered and alone. They had chosen Liam again, just like they always had, and this time, they had all turned against me. It broke something inside me that I didn't think could ever be fixed. I barely slept, barely ate, feeling hollow, like all I wanted was to disappear. I filed for divorce, but the thought of going through with it felt like trudging through quicksand. Every time I saw Chloe at court, she looked back at me with that sickly sweet, practiced innocence that had convinced my family she was the victim. In court, she swore the child was mine, and my family showed up to support her story, painting me as unstable, aggressive, and paranoid. They said I was the one who had pushed Chloe to the breaking point. Even my father, who I hadn't spoken to in years, stood there, shaking his head in disappointment, claiming I had always been difficult and resentful towards the family. I tried to fight, but when it came down to it, I didn't have the strength. Chloe won the car and kept some of our belongings that she wanted. I let her have them, desperate to end it all and escape this nightmare that had consumed my life. I barely had enough energy left to keep working, let alone stand up for myself. The only thing I demanded was a DNA test for the baby. I needed the truth, even if it was the only bit of closure I would ever get. Before you hear what happens next, please subscribe to the channel. The moment I insisted on the DNA test, my father, Rick, called me. He tried to talk me out of it, his voice carrying an odd, nervous laugh, as if he couldn't quite believe what I was asking. "Caleb, do you really want to put yourself through that kind of drama?" He chuckled, almost as if he thought it was ridiculous. "You don't need a test. Just look at Chloe. She's an honest and intelligent woman. That baby's yours." I kept telling him I needed proof, but he danced around it with strange excuses. "It's a waste of money," he insisted. "It's a hassle." Then he tried to guilt-trip me. "Think of how embarrassed Chloe will be. You don't want to be the guy who's calling his own wife a liar, do you?" He even threw in some half-baked story about how DNA tests weren't all that accurate and how people had been raising kids without them for centuries. It was like he'd try anything to stop me from moving forward, but I stayed firm. After everything that had happened, I needed answers. So, after the baby was born, I went ahead with the test. A few weeks later, the results came in. I wasn't the father. The relief I felt was indescribable. I didn't have to pay child support. I didn't have to pretend the baby was mine. For the first time in a long while, I could finally breathe. Funny thing was, there was a small line of extra information in the DNA results. At the time, I didn't think much of it. My mind was still reeling from the shock and relief of not being tied to Chloe's mess. But that extra bit of information would come back to surprise me. Just not yet. I'll get into that important detail later. With Chloe and the family drama behind me, I threw myself into work. My anger, disappointment, and frustration from years of being treated like an outsider all fueled my focus on the projects I was working on. Then, COVID hit, and everything changed. People everywhere were losing jobs and stability, and the world went remote. But my friend Mike and I saw an opportunity. We decided to take a risk and launch an online business idea we'd only been toying with before. We poured ourselves into it, working from dawn till dark, pulling late nights, and giving our all to every detail. And by some stroke of luck, it took off. While other businesses were crashing during the pandemic, our little project was somehow thriving. The online business started bringing in real money, more than I ever imagined. Suddenly, everything I'd been through, all the pain, seemed worth it for the freedom and success I was now experiencing. Around the time my business with Mike was thriving, my family's little cafe was rapidly sinking. They hadn't adapted at all to the pandemic. No delivery, no takeout options, nothing to help keep them afloat. When things got tough, Liam, the so-called golden boy, was still living at home, draining my parents while going out with his friends whenever he felt like it. He didn't lift a finger to help with the business. He could have pitched in, figured out a delivery system, or done something, anything. But that wasn't Liam's style. The cafe, which they had relied on for years, eventually shut its doors for good, leaving them buried in debt with no way out. They tried everything to stay afloat, applying for social assistance and jumping through all the hoops for government support. But nothing was enough. Meanwhile, Chloe somehow found out how well my online business was doing. What started as just Mike and me had grown to a team of 20, and our revenue was growing fast. Word must have gotten around because soon my phone was buzzing nonstop with calls from my family. First, it was my parents. My mom, who hadn't spoken to me in months, left a long voicemail about how families should stick together during tough times and how, Caleb, you're in a position to help your family, the ones who raised you and gave you everything. Everything, I thought, almost laughing. Caleb, you have a responsibility here, she said, as if it were my moral duty to bail them out. Then my dad chimed in, talking about honoring your parents and reminding me of all the sacrifices they made for me. I could practically hear him looking down his nose at me, like I owed them my success. Caleb, you're doing well now, son, he said, as if it were some great fatherly advice. Your mother and I, we're not getting any younger. It's only right for a son to look after his family. Next up was Chloe, who hadn't spoken to me since the divorce. She was all sweetness and charm, like we'd never gone through that ugly court battle. She started talking about family values and said, I know we've had our issues, Caleb, but you know, our history is our history. We need to move past it. Your family needs you now more than ever. Then, to my surprise, she had the nerve to say I was setting a bad example for the child, who, by the way, wasn't even mine. And of course, Liam himself decided to call. He sounded as casual as ever, like we were old friends catching up. Hey, bro, long time? Huh? Listen, things have been rough around here. You know how it is. Any chance you could, throw some help our way? He rambled on about how we were family and how I could help him get back on his feet, as if he'd fallen from some high pedestal. Come on, man. It'd just be a loan. You know? I'd pay you back someday. At one point, I was this close to blocking all their numbers just to stop the endless guilt trips and pleased to fulfill my so-called family duty. Here they were, crawling back after everything they'd put me through, trying to milk me for whatever they could. It was almost laughable, after the lies, the betrayals, and years of being shoved aside. They thought I'd just roll over and start handing them money. To this day, I don't know how I kept it together, how I didn't break down or turn to drinking or anything else to numb the pain. Instead, I just kept doing what I'd been doing, working hard, ignoring their calls, and building my life on my own terms. But there were days when the weight of it all almost crushed me, when I wondered how I hadn't just snapped. I want to make it clear that they weren't interested in regular jobs. They were hoping to fix their situation at my expense. They didn't get a single cent from me, not even a hint of a yes, but that didn't stop them. They just switched tactics. Since they couldn't squeeze any money out of me directly, they started spreading rumors to anyone who would listen. Friends, distant relatives, even neighbors I barely knew. The one that made me laugh the most was my dad telling people that he had sacrificed his own comfort to buy me a brand new Ford to show his love, and that Liam, of all people, had to make do with it after me. Anyone who knew the truth would have found that laughable. Remember the beginning of this story? My dad actually bought Liam a brand new Ford while I was scrimping and saving for a used car. But Dad had no shame. He said whatever he thought would make him look generous and me look ungrateful. They even made up some version of my college years, claiming my parents had poured their hearts and souls into helping me succeed. Apparently, they had worked day and night to help me graduate and support me financially, which couldn't have been farther from the truth. When I heard this from people who thought I should be grateful for everything they'd supposedly done for me, I had to fight back laughter. It finally hit me. There was no chance of parting on good terms. They would lie and twist the story however they could to make me feel guilty. So I decided to teach them a little lesson. It was time for a new plan. Something small but sharp. Something that would give them a taste of their own medicine. One night, while going through some old papers, I came across the DNA test results from the court. I'd kept it tucked away, always wary of what my family might pull. As I looked at it again, something clicked. The report didn't just show that the child wasn't mine. It showed a 0% kinship with the baby, meaning there was no genetic connection whatsoever. And that's when it hit me. If Liam and I were truly brothers, there should have been some percentage of a match. That could only mean one thing. I wasn't biologically related to Liam. The pieces started to fit together. Maybe I was adopted. It would explain everything. The way my parents favored Liam and completely disregarded me. Maybe they had adopted me when they couldn't have children, and once they finally had their own, I became an afterthought. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. And with that realization, I came up with a plan. It was time for a family dinner and a brutally honest conversation. I'd help them all right, but not in the way they expected. I called my parents and suggested a family reconciliation dinner. I told them we could sit down, enjoy some good food, talk things over, and move past our issues. I hinted that I might even help them out financially. The response was exactly what I expected. They were thrilled, practically tripping over each other to agree. They didn't have a clue what was waiting for them at the restaurant. I ordered everything, the best appetizers, main courses, and desserts they offered. I picked an upscale place with high prices for everything, knowing my family would lap it up and think it was just the first taste of what was to come. When we sat down, I looked around the table. There they were, Mom, Dad, Chloe, and Liam, playing their roles perfectly. They were suddenly so polite, acting as if the past never happened, as if they hadn't spent years tearing me down. It was like watching actors in a bad play, laying it on thick with all smiles and fake warmth. Finally, I decided to get straight to the point. I leaned in, looked them all in the eye, and asked, "Am I adopted or not?" The table went dead silent for a few seconds. Nobody moved. Then, Mom's eyes began to well up with crocodile tears, like she had rehearsed the look for this very moment. Dad cleared his throat and, after a beat, finally spoke up. He admitted, yes, I was adopted. They'd had trouble having children, so they decided to adopt me. Then, a few years later, their miracle child, Liam, came along. Dad claimed they never told me because they didn't want me to feel different or slighted. The irony of it all was almost too much to bear. After all the ways they treated me, they thought not telling me would somehow make up for everything else. Then they launched into a whole speech about how much they loved me. Even Liam joined in, saying he grew up wearing my old clothes and toys and was jealous of me. The hypocrisy was laughable. They twisted every detail to make it sound like I had been cherished and respected my whole life. Then came the kicker. My parents said they were proud of me and that the misunderstandings we'd had over the years were actually deliberate, all to strengthen my character. They claimed it was all for my own good, that they had shaped me into who I was today. I felt sick just listening to it, but I kept my cool, letting them finish their entire speech. I nodded, even smiled as they spoke, waiting for the right moment. When they were finally done, I reached into my jacket and pulled out a small, beautiful box. I slid it across the table toward them, watching their eyes light up, thinking this was their payday. Inside the box was a brand new bank card. I explained that I had deposited a decent amount into the account and would be making monthly deposits to help them out. They exchanged looks, beaming, nodding in approval, already imagining their imaginary fortune. The only problem was, the card had no credit limit. I'd only deposited $5 into the account, $1 for each of them. Mom, Dad, Liam, Chloe, and the kid who wasn't even mine. I watched their faces closely, feeling a calm sense of satisfaction as they smiled proudly, completely unaware of the joke they had just fallen for. After handing over the card, they raised their glasses to toast to new beginnings and family unity. Clinking glasses, all smiles, no idea what was really going on. The rest of the dinner went smoothly, with them busy enjoying their fancy meals and drinks, thinking they had finally worn me down. At one point, I told them I needed to step out to use the restroom. No one suspected a thing. But instead of heading to the bathroom, I walked straight to the exit. On my way out, I stopped a waiter and told him I had an emergency and had to leave immediately, but that my family would be covering everything at the table. I left with my head held high. I walked out of that restaurant with a deep sense of satisfaction, imagining their faces when the bill arrived. I pictured them glancing around, waiting for me to return and cover the check. Soon after, my phone started buzzing with their calls, one after another. They'd realized I was gone. Then came the notifications, multiple alerts from their attempts to pay the bill with that bank card. I could only imagine their reaction when they saw there was just $5 on it. Not exactly enough for a 5-star meal. When I got home, I blocked their numbers for good. But for a laugh, I kept my promise to support them, adding $5 to the card every month. It was a small, monthly reminder of how much I cared for them, just as much as they cared for me. Of course, they tried to reach me through mutual friends and sent me messages online. But after I posted the story online, people started seeing their true colors. My family quickly quieted down, trying to pretend I didn't exist. And that's how I taught them a lesson they'd never forget. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
My wife suggested an open marriage. I caught her cheating, got tested for STDs, and filed for divorce. My wife, a 37-year-old woman, started a new job 4.5 months ago and made some new friends. I, a 36-year-old man, didn't like her new friends much. They were strong feminists, often seeing themselves as wounded persons and being very socially conscious. They were the kind of women who'd get upset whether you held the door open for them or didn't. It felt like a lose-lose situation. At first, I didn't take it seriously, but over the past 2 months, I noticed troubling changes in my wife's behavior. We've been married for 11 years and have 2 children, a 10-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy. Things got progressively worse. She began accusing me of various things, like being inherently evil due to the historical oppression of women by men. It was absurd. I tried to stay patient, but these arguments often ended with me saying something like, "I haven't done anything wrong to you. The only thing I'm guilty of is loving you." It usually left her quiet, but the next day she'd start the same arguments with different points. Around 5 weeks ago, I had a strong gut feeling that something was seriously wrong. She started coming home late without letting me know, and I couldn't reach her on the phone. She would be distant and cold even when sober. The next day, she'd dismiss my concerns, accusing me of being controlling and reading too much into things. This happened a few times. I tried to check her phone but couldn't find concrete evidence, although I suspected she deleted many messages. I found a conversation with one of her new friends discussing the idea of an open relationship, which confirmed my suspicions of her cheating. My wife said she wanted to discuss this on the second Monday of December with the kids at their grandparents' for Christmas. We were supposed to join them later. So she brought up the topic over breakfast as if it were a sudden thought, asking about my thoughts on an open relationship. Fortunately, I was prepared. I'd been reading on Reddit and knew there was no saving this marriage. My best outcome was to protect myself and our children. From here on, it was about self-preservation and safeguarding the kids. I didn't raise my voice. I just asked direct questions. She'd been confident until she saw the seriousness on my face. Me, who is he? She, what do you mean? Me, don't play dumb. If you want to talk honestly, let's do it. If you can't be honest, what's the point? She, what do you mean? Me, if you lie, we can't have this conversation about our relationship. I can tell you're hiding something. So who's the guy you're involved with? She, I'm not. Me, don't lie. You've shattered my trust. Be honest or we divorce. No arguments, just divorce. Do you understand? She, I understand. She confessed to 2 one-night stands with married men and then revealed she planned to sleep with a colleague from work. She believed it was best for her, and I had no right to control her. I asked about the colleague and got his name and his wife's name. She claimed their relationship was open. She also suggested setting me up with her friends, one of whom was eager. I declined. I asked for her phone, which she showed me how to unlock. While she was in the bathroom, I locked myself in my office, which panicked her. I used recovery software to find deleted messages and installed a spy app online. When I came out, I gave her the phone and told her to leave. She argued, but I responded with single-word answers. She showed no remorse throughout this. She yelled that I was controlling, perpetuating the historical oppression of women, and not truly loving her. Her friends reassured her, saying I wouldn't go through with any threats. One of them shared a story of how she had manipulated her ex-husband using such accusations. I've ordered cameras for my house now. I know I need to record everything. I couldn't believe what I witnessed. I've never threatened her in any way. After that, she started messaging her affair partner to meet up, and they agreed to meet at a hotel, which left me shocked. I went online to find the AP's wife, and it didn't take long. I reached out to her on Facebook and shared all the details, including what was happening at the hotel. She thanked me and hung up. A few hours later, I received a video from her. She went to the motel and confronted them, yelling this wasn't the first time her husband had cheated, and she expressed her anger. She recorded my wife getting dressed on the bed, which made me feel sick. The AP's wife even slapped and cursed at my wife. I messaged my wife, telling her I had seen the video and never wanted her near me again. It seems she views our situation as some kind of competition where she believes she's winning. It's hard to understand. It's as if she's disconnected from reality and doesn't realize we're getting a divorce. I joined my wife's family WhatsApp group and informed them about our divorce due to her infidelity. I thanked them for welcoming me into the family and then left the group. I've received calls and messages from her, but I haven't read or responded to them. I just don't have the energy for it. I talked to my parents and shared everything with them. My father messaged my wife that she wouldn't be welcome for Christmas. I'm at my parents' place now and have spoken to my boss, who granted me time off until mid-January to sort things out. I've been monitoring my wife's conversation with her new friends, which have become increasingly frantic. I don't think it has fully dawned on her that she's lost her family and her new friends and the AP don't truly care about her. She has sent me numerous messages and even showed up at my parents' house, demanding to celebrate Christmas with us. My father threatened to call the police if she didn't leave. Now I'm searching for divorce lawyers and shedding tears. The pain hit me hard once. I arrived at my parents' house. It's all so confusing. Reading their chats and interacting with her brings me immense pain. I've only responded to her messages twice. It doesn't matter what you say. I don't know who you are. You are not my wife. My wife would never break my heart and soul while smiling. We're getting a divorce, and I don't care about your words or demands. You have no influence or right to ask anything of me. We're done. Her messages stopped after that last one. The pain is sometimes unbearable. I wish this never happened. I wish I could go back to how things were before, but I can't do that to myself. This is the worst Christmas ever. I couldn't help but explain to the kids that Mommy doesn't want to be part of the family anymore, and she wants to be with other men. We're getting a divorce, and they're naturally upset. Thankfully, my mom and dad are here to comfort them while I'm falling apart. I'll try to get back on my feet for the sake of my kids, but I'll never go back to her. I wish I had waited until after Christmas to get them into counseling. I blurted it out when they asked about when their mother would come. I could never forgive myself if I went back to her. The level of disrespect and heartlessness in her behavior is unforgivable. I'm lost and can't understand why she expects anything from me at this point. Is she mentally ill or something? I apologize for the rambling. I just needed to get this off my chest. What ultimately got to me was when my soon-to-be ex-wife used harsh language to describe how our marriage and particularly our children were a burden in her life. She claimed they held her back from being a successful woman who could reach her full potential. She also blamed me, her husband, for oppressing her and preventing her from having a good life. She even said that her family was the reason she didn't have a successful career and had missed out on casual experiences. It was too much for me to handle. For the next roughly 30 hours, I kept reading and rereading all the emails and chats we'd had. Upon reflection, I realized she didn't provide any specific examples of how we were supposedly burdens or oppressors. It was all broad statements without any supporting arguments or instances. In reality, I had never stopped her from pursuing anything. I financially supported almost everything, as her part-time job's minimum wage wouldn't cover much. I had also supported her hobbies, dreams, and aspirations, even when she took classes and quit them halfway through. I made sure to express my love for her daily and appreciate her contribution to the family. I'd take her out and be there for her whenever she needed me. If this is oppression, then I'd like to experience it, please. But I digress. At some point while reading, I just passed out. When I woke up, my 3 best friends were in the kitchen with my dad preparing dinner. I've known these guys since childhood. Let's call them Mike, Bob, and Frank. My dad had briefed them on the situation. I broke down again, and I was in a daze until Friday evening. Mike is a military veteran who lost his left arm below the elbow. We supported him during his recovery when his wife left him. Fortunately, they didn't have any children, and Mike later adopted 2 kids and found a wonderful girlfriend. He set up a Zoom call with his counselor who helped him during his recovery. His insights into my emotional state, even though he specialized in helping amputees, were incredibly helpful. He explained that a significant part of my identity and spiritual self was tied to my role as a husband, and now that part was dead. Similar to an amputee experiencing phantom pain in a missing limb, I would feel phantom pain from the dead part of my identity. We had extensive conversations, and I've been gradually improving since. Bob is an executive at a security company, but he's secretive about his job. I don't know what he does, but he's quite wealthy. Bob contacted a law firm connected to his company, and on Sunday morning, I talked to a lawyer I could never afford on my own. Bob, who had been bullied a lot in his youth, assured me not to worry about the legal bill. He would cover it. He was glad to finally repay me for standing up for him when he was bullied. Frank is a teacher at a private school and has 7 children. Yes, you read that right, 7. My kids adore him and his family. Frank has been ensuring my kids are well taken care of while I regain my footing and get everything in order. Yesterday was a very eventful day. It began with an early morning STD screening, which revealed that I had contracted chlamydia from my soon-to-be ex-wife. I'll need another screening in 6 months. My self-pity turned into pure anger upon learning this. I've decided it's time to go all out for full custody and to provide her with nothing if I can manage it. My lawyer managed to locate the ex-husband of my wife's feminist friend, who bragged about how she had deceived him. It turned out to be relatively easy through court documents. Talking to him on WhatsApp, he expressed his gratitude and shared the horrors he had endured because of this woman. Now I have a better idea of what to expect from my soon-to-be ex-wife. It was sickening to hear about the experiences he had been through. I'm now ready for a battle. After our conversation preparing for a legal war, I was deeply saddened by his story, as he had been homeless and hadn't seen his kids for 4 years due to his ex-wife's lies. I understand that I'm at a disadvantage as a man in the court system, so I'll ensure I have a mountain of evidence. My lawyer suggested a preemptive move with a restraining order, given her negative and aggressive comments about males in general. Especially for the sake of our son, growing up in a household with a parent openly hostile toward males is undeniably damaging, which is why I'm pursuing full custody. I've informed my lawyer to proceed, and she's expecting to serve the restraining order today. I had a Zoom call with my soon-to-be ex-wife. Keep in mind that she hasn't reached out to me or anyone since the argument at my dad's house. It's clear she doesn't care about any of us. The call was incredibly strange. She had dolled up with a revealing outfit, trying to look her absolute best. I haven't seen her make such an effort in years. Throughout our conversation, she attempted to provoke me into an argument, but I managed to stay composed. My lawyer had given me guidance on what to discuss. It's considered positive if both parties make an effort for an amicable divorce before going for a contested one. I was recording the conversation, and I even referred to her as my soon-to-be ex-wife, which she lived up to. She started with a bizarre statement about different types of male anatomy, discussing how they change when erect or not. I couldn't believe she began a conversation with such a topic. Then she mentioned her excitement about the end of current restrictions to explore this further in person. I responded by saying I wasn't interested in her hobbies and that I wanted to focus on our divorce. Her hostility became evident when I didn't react as she had hoped. At one point, she claimed to be going to the bathroom and muted herself. I observed as she discussed what to do with me with her friends, cursing me solely because I'm a man. Several times during the call, I had a strange feeling that she treated this as a game where she was in control and I had no choice but to go along with whatever she wanted. We made no progress on our divorce, so I concluded that we were heading for a contested divorce. By the way, I contracted chlamydia from you, and unlike you, I haven't been involved with anyone else. You should get yourself to a clinic, I said. She frowned at me, not believing my words. I have no idea what's going on with her, and at this point, I no longer care. I shared the recording with my lawyer, and she was quite surprised. Everyone thinks my wife's behavior is irrational, and perhaps it is. Since I own her phone in the subscription, I can use the chat logs in court. It's entirely legal for me to monitor my own device. After our call, there was a frantic discussion among her friends, but I no longer care about what they discuss. My lawyer is confident that we'll win this case unless there's something I haven't disclosed. So here we are. It still hurts, but I can see it as phantom pain. I've stopped feeling sorry for myself, and am now taking a proactive approach. No holds barred. I need to protect myself and my kids. I'm confident that my kids will be fine, and I'll ensure they get therapy as needed. My soon-to-be ex-wife will soon be a distant memory, and I'll start building a new and better life. Today I found out that she was aware of the chlamydia infection and received treatment but didn't inform me. It's quite frustrating. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone for their feedback. Some people see me as strong or somehow winning in this situation, but I can see that my anger shines through when I may seem defiant and confident. The truth is, I'm not. I wish this had never happened. I wish my family was still intact and I had a simple, comfortable life ahead with my wife. No one is a winner here. As the kids grow and begin their own lives, my wife's behavior has left me no choice, and there's no turning back at this point. I desperately wish this situation hadn't been necessary. I can never trust her again, and every night I cry myself to sleep, both for my own loss and the fact that my children will grow up in a broken home. It's also heartbreaking that my children no longer have a functional relationship with their mother. How do you answer a child's question like, "Why doesn't mommy want to see me anymore? Doesn't she love me?" If anyone has an answer, please let me know because I certainly don't. Every day I wake up and tell myself that my heart is already broken into so many pieces that it can't possibly break any further, only to be proven wrong daily. My wife still doesn't know that I can monitor her communications, or she doesn't care. She is 100% convinced that I will never leave her and that my reaction to her behavior is entirely unjustified. She continues to speak negatively about me, our marriage, and our children to her friends. I don't understand why she despises us so much. We haven't done any of the things she accuses us of doing to her friends. As I mentioned earlier, my lawyer obtained a temporary restraining order against her. There was a hearing yesterday morning, and since there were no new direct threats, it wasn't extended. My lawyer suggested using her knowingly infecting me with chlamydia as leverage to try to negotiate an uncontested divorce. I wish we could part ways through a reasonable process. I hate that I have to see her as an adversary and anticipate the worst possible outcome. If she wanted to leave me, I would have been able to accept it. Why is she pushing me into this highly adversarial process? Why does she seem determined to cause as much misuse as possible to the people who once cared about her? What could she possibly gain from all this? I would appreciate any insights into this, as it just doesn't make sense to me. If we end up in court, I might have to pay her a lump sum for our house as equity, but I probably won't be responsible for alimony since she doesn't show any interest in the kids. I'm hopeful about winning custody if it goes to court. My lawyer suggested we try to achieve an amicable divorce, and I agreed. We plan to meet with my soon-to-be ex-wife and her representative, hopefully this week. The ex-husband who was deceived by the dishonest person spent New Year's Eve with me and the kids. The injustice within the justice system against fathers is simply unbelievable. I no longer have any illusions about receiving a fair process if we go to court. His ex lied extensively, and the court took her word as fact without any evidence. He has barely seen his children since. He's been forced to pay unreasonable amounts of alimony and child support, which has taken a toll on him. He even considered ending his life. With the new evidence he received from me, he now has renewed hope. We both discussed it with my lawyer, and she recommended that he hold on to the evidence until the meeting with my wife and her counsel. If he takes action now, it will reveal that we have access to their communications. My lawyer's primary goal is to facilitate our divorce as quickly and smoothly as possible. Right now, I simply hope I can distance myself from my soon-to-be ex-wife. If she decides to fight, it could drag on for a long time, and it's causing me a lot of stress. I just need to break free. Unfortunately, the bizarre situation continues. The meeting with my lawyer and my soon-to-be ex-wife took place yesterday afternoon, but she arrived 30 minutes late. Surprisingly, she didn't bring a lawyer and insisted she didn't have or need one. Instead, she brought one of her new acquaintances. My lawyer had given me strict instructions on how to conduct myself, emphasizing that I should avoid negative reactions. If they addressed me, I was to respond non-confrontationally or positively if possible. When my lawyer placed her hands flat on the table, I had to remain silent. However, they arrived late without wearing masks, and the harpy attempted to insult and provoke me in various ways, followed by my soon-to-be ex-wife joining in. My lawyer tried to steer the conversation towards our divorce, but they continued with their jokes and laughter, often aimed at me. It was cringeworthy to witness. It's clear now that my wife still believes this is all a ploy, thinking there's no way I can divorce her. In her mind, only she can initiate a divorce, and she assumes she'll get everything she wants. I was left wondering what on earth was happening. I refrained from saying anything substantial and only responded a few times with non-committal statements like, "Yes, you're probably right," or "I really don't know." Finally, they seemed to lose their steam. My lawyer presented the proposed settlement for an amicable divorce, mentioning my willingness to be generous for a quick and peaceful resolution, including a substantial lump sum for equity in the house and investments. My soon-to-be ex-wife couldn't contain her excitement, and her harpy friend encouraged her. They were eager to sign immediately. My lawyer, on the other hand, repeatedly suggested going over the rest of the agreement, but my soon-to-be ex-wife was adamant about signing right away, even discussing when she'd receive the money and their plans for the pub. My lawyer made a call and a notary arrived asking for our identification documents. We signed 2 copies and the notary stamped them. My lawyer, almost figuratively standing on her head with excitement, thanked my soon-to-be ex-wife and her friend and informed them that we were done. They left, and my wife even forgot her copy of the agreement on the table. My lawyer signaled with flat hands not to say anything while they were in the building. Once we saw them leaving the parking lot, my lawyer congratulated me. She went on to describe how this had been the most peculiar session she had ever experienced for a negotiated divorce. She explained that my soon-to-be ex-wife's copy of the agreement would be sent to her after we had a hearing in front of the judge, or if she hired a lawyer who requested it. Until then, it would remain forgotten in my lawyer's drawer. So, it seems, on the surface, that my divorce will be less challenging than initially anticipated. However, my soon-to-be ex-wife can still retain legal representation and contest it. My lawyer assured me she would do her best to expedite a hearing with a judge. It would likely be a video call. I also hired a private investigator after receiving advice on Reddit. He provided photos of my wife kissing 2 different men at different bars and going to a hotel with one of them. I have accumulated substantial evidence, and I hope it will suffice if needed. My wife signed to grant me full custody with a one-time payment and no spousal support. I just need to figure out the finances. I have a plan, and Bob offered to fund the entire amount if necessary. My lawyer advised me to keep a low profile, continue paying for everything as usual, and avoid stirring the pot in any way. I'm advised not to communicate with anyone we both know, and to remain patient until the hearing. Yesterday was the hearing, and I'm essentially divorced. It will take 4 to 6 months for the paperwork to be officially processed, but the outcome is unlikely to change at this point. The only option for a reversal would be if both my wife and I decided to halt the process. I'm utterly exhausted and haven't slept in days. Please forgive me if I seem a bit scattered. I need to get this off my chest. Maybe I can finally get some sleep after sharing it. My exceptional lawyer secured an early hearing just 12 days after we filed the paperwork, probably by pulling some strings. But let me stay focused on the recent events from the weekend up until today. It's been chaos. On Friday morning, a group of police officers arrived at my doorstep with a search warrant for my house. I was bewildered and concerned for the kids, so I asked if I could take them outside while they conducted their search, which they agreed to. They didn't provide many details, but I managed to obtain a copy of the warrant. I was quite shaken and couldn't make much sense of it. It appears that the suspicions about my ex-wife's behavior being medication-related are partially correct. The police officers ended up ransacking my house. I contacted my lawyer and she spoke to them, but since the warrant was valid, there was little we could do. It didn't occur to me then, but now, I have surveillance cameras installed everywhere to protect against potential false accusations. I have video and audio recordings of everything. If I choose to, I might be able to file a claim later. However, I'm not sure if I have the energy or willingness to do so. Perhaps I'll put it behind me and move on. I didn't know at the time, but my ex and her 3 friends drove my car while intoxicated and crashed into a house at high speed. They were all arrested, all found to be intoxicated, and they had various medications in and on their bodies. They suffered injuries in the crash, with the passenger in critical condition, and there are doubts about her survival. The lead friend, whom I'll call Henrietta, is the one who bragged about deceiving her ex-husband, Jack. Jack and I have become good friends, and I'll get back to him. Fortunately, the police didn't find anything during their search. I provided a statement indicating that my ex no longer resides at my house. She lives with her parents. I'm uncertain about her current activities. No, I didn't give Henrietta permission to use my car. Upon returning to my house, I broke down. It was utterly devastated and in disarray. It was the final straw. The only thought that crossed my mind was to call my dad, who brought me and the kids to stay with my mom. My dad rallied a group of 26 friends and family members who cleaned and repaired my entire house while I sat on the back porch, emotionally drained, consuming my mom's comforting food. They restored everything from every room to clothes, dishes, furniture, even addressing minor issues like loose door handles. It's now the cleanest it has ever been. They went above and beyond for me, and I'm not sure how I can ever repay their kindness. Over the weekend, I shifted from despair to feeling much better thanks to them. The cops discovered more medication at Henrietta's house, where her boyfriend wasn't present. There was no babysitter either, just the kids left unattended. Child Protective Services CPS intervened, and Jack won temporary emergency custody on Saturday. He presented chat logs to the judge, along with evidence of abandonment and an excessive amount of medications, leading to him gaining custody without much difficulty. Jack is ecstatic. He had seen very little of his children over the past 5 years. He had been raising funds to fight Henrietta in court when this situation unfolded. To make the custody permanent, he still has to go through a court process, but the children are in good hands at this point. Many believe that Henrietta will face significant jail time if her critically injured friend doesn't survive. Afterward, Jack plans to pursue child support and compensation for Henrietta's actions. Although he isn't overly optimistic about the latter, he mainly wants to be with his kids and ensure they have a good life, as it's evident that Henrietta has been negligent in caring for them. Bob has been supportive and found a rental apartment for Jack through a friend. I've realized that I know very little about Bob's personal and professional life, and I intend to rectify that. But let me get back on track. Henrietta was driving when they veered off the road and crashed into a house. They were all injured, and search warrants for drink and medication were issued for everyone in the vehicle. My ex is still registered at my house, and on Sunday I decided that I'm selling the house and moving away as soon as possible. I fear a similar incident could occur again. Last Sunday, her parents called me. They told me that their house was searched as well. They had visited their daughter in jail on Saturday, and they no longer trust anything she tells them. To cut a long story short, they came over to talk on Sunday, and it turns out she has been lying to them about everything. She has been going out to party and cheating on me, despite telling her parents that she was staying with me to work things out. Her parents were unaware of what was really happening, thinking her cheating was just a one-time mistake. That's pretty much what she told them. On Monday, my wife called me to ask for bail money, which was $155,000. Her parents had already refused to help. After consulting with my lawyer, she drew up an agreement that the bail amount would be deducted from the final settlement, with her mother as the custodian of the remaining money. My lawyer wanted to ensure my wife had no excuse for missing the court hearing, so my ex didn't have much choice and signed the agreement. She was released on Monday afternoon. According to her parents, she didn't comply with their conditions for her to continue living with them, which included stopping medication, committing to rehab, being open about her activities and dropping her bad friends. She apparently left their house on Tuesday to stay with some new friends. She also missed the court hearing, and I was awarded full custody. The settlement was based on our agreement and was completed in just 30 minutes. It'll take 4 to 6 months for all the paperwork to be processed, but in reality, it's a done deal. There's not much that can be done to change it now. Let's fast forward to today. I couldn't sleep. Everyone congratulated me as if I had won a major victory, but it doesn't feel that way at all. I still love my wife, even though I know our relationship is over. She used to be my best friend and soulmate until recently. Even though my love for her has been severely damaged, it's still there, and it hurts. A lot. There are no winners here. I lose, my wife loses, and my kids lose. It's hard to find the right words. It's like being asked to celebrate after losing both of my legs. People congratulate me as if I've saved half a kneecap while losing both legs. So, I can't sleep, and when I do, I'm plagued by terrible nightmares that wake me up covered in sweat. I'm venting a bit here, apologies for that. Anyway, today I got a call from the hospital that my wife is hospitalized. I'm still her emergency contact, and she's still on my health insurance. There was an incident, and she lost some teeth, broke her jaw, and will need to stay under observation for a few days. I brought her parents to the hospital, and it turns out some of her new friends had severely beaten her up. The reason was that they believed my wife had shared chat logs from her phone with a guy named Jack, exposing their actions. They assumed she had given the logs to Jack, which led to the beating. She still doesn't realize that I can monitor her phone. I'll continue supporting her financially until I have the legal papers in my hand. I just can't believe it until I see it. Right now, she has nothing. She asked if she could move back home, but I firmly said no. Her mother won't give her a penny unless she gets clean and stays clean for at least a year. They offered her a place to live under strict conditions. And if she doesn't accept, I don't see how she'll manage. For the first time, I saw a hint of regret in her since this all began, but I doubt it's genuine. She hardly looked me in the eye during our meeting. It pained me to see her like this, and I felt the urge to protect her. But she's an adult. Her behavior is dangerous, and I need to protect my kids. She didn't ask about the court hearing or her injured friend's condition. She seemed annoyed and disconnected. I still can't understand her actions. She has lost everything, destroyed her family, and caused pain for many people, all for a fleeting high in casual closeness. I'll maintain no contact with her until she's been clean for a substantial period. I can't handle all this chaos. I'm feeling somewhat depressed and extremely tired. I hardly get any sleep, and when I do, I'm plagued by nightmares. The good news is that the kids are doing better. My dad has been a huge help, and I can't imagine what I'd do without him. We went to his cabin this weekend for some skiing with the kids. It was a great break. I have minimal contact with my ex. I did have a conversation with one of her friends, the one who was in critical condition. She's awake now but in bad shape. Her nurse told me that no one had visited her during her stay. Her family even refused to see her when contacted. I'm concerned that the people who attacked my ex might come after me and the kids, so I asked the nurse if I could speak to her, and she agreed. I know I probably shouldn't, but I felt the need to ask her about what had happened since my wife got involved with them. She started by asking if I wanted a closeness favor for $120, which was quite awkward. I offered her $150 in exchange for information. My wife's new friends are all heavy medicament users. Henrietta convinced my wife to try medicaments and party with them, selling closeness favors to fund their weakness. Henrietta was the ringleader in this group. They preach feminist ideals, but as she put it, it's all a facade to protect their egos. In reality, they're selling themselves for medicament money. My wife got caught up in this lifestyle and soon started selling closeness to support her own medicament habit. It's tough to hear that the person I loved had turned to this to feed her weakness. It explains why money seemed to be her top priority. Now, based on what she's told me, it's mostly meth that she's using. Nobody visited her because she has stolen, cheated, mistreated, and lied to everyone in her life, so nobody wants anything to do with her. She told me without any hesitation how sad she was to have survived. She has no hope for the future, and she looks extremely unhealthy without her makeup. It was painful, and I was devastated just listening to her. I cried a lot for the sake of my wife. I'm not making excuses for her. She chose to get involved in this damaging stuff, and now she'll have to face the consequences. I'll get back to the details about the guys who assaulted my ex-wife later. Henrietta is facing a list of charges, including making threats, resisting arrest, possessing medicaments, engaging in prostitution, trafficking medicaments, neglect, driving under the influence, causing property damage, and stealing a vehicle. She's been denied bail due to the risk of her fleeing, and it's likely that she'll be in legal trouble for a while, at least I hope so. Before I continue, I want to express my gratitude to those of you who shared your experiences dealing with dependency. Many of you warned me that my ex might attempt self-misuse now that things are closing in on her, and you were right. She tried to intentionally overdose. I had discussed this possibility with her father, so we decided to keep a close watch on her. Fortunately, she still doesn't know that I have real-time access to her phone. While we were at the cabin on Saturday, I received a message from her that sounded like a pass-away note. She talked about her weakness, prostitution, letting everyone down, and how she felt like she had no other choice. I immediately called her father, and since I could monitor her location, he rushed out to find her unconscious on a park bench. She was taken to the hospital and treated. She was also severely hypothermic. I hate to think about what might have happened if he had arrived just a bit later. She's now on methadone. Her father has been appointed as her legal guardian. She can't object to treatment anymore. Her father had her forcibly admitted to a rehab center, and she will undergo a sedated detox. I'm not sure when, but probably this week. Her father's appointment is not solely due to her overdose, but because she abandoned her children, which apparently indicates she's not thinking rationally as she tries to end her life. That's the legal reasoning. Thankfully, I haven't canceled her life insurance yet, so she will receive treatment. I've offered to help with the financial side as long as my ex isn't aware that it's coming from me. I've been concerned that the men who assaulted my wife might come after me and the kids. Remember that Jack presented chat logs in court, which they believed my wife had given him. I talked to Jack about this, and he decided to take care of it since he benefited from the disclosure. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but Jack is a big, imposing guy. He went to the guy's apartment, which was a real dump, by the way. He confronted them and told them that Henrietta had provided him with the chat logs, and since they had misused someone he knew, they had a choice to make: go to the police and confess everything about the assault or face the consequences right there, which would involve some painful and permanent injuries if they chose the second option. As he described it to me, he made it clear that he hoped they would go with the first choice. They apparently wasted no time heading to the police. Needless to say, I no longer worry about them. I found a new apartment, and I'll be moving soon. Once again, Bob came through for me. All in all, I'm very downcast. This situation weighs heavily on my mind. What keeps me going is the support of my friends and family, and I know I need to stay strong for the kids. My heart aches for my ex despite everything. I don't regret marrying her. I still love her, but I realize we can never be together again. She's not the person she used to be, and there's too much pain between us. Despite all the recent hardships, we had a good life before that. I wouldn't have my children if it weren't for her, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. I know the pain will linger for a long time. Strangely enough, the news of my wife's weakness has made it easier for my kids to understand. It's simpler to explain that mommy is sick, and it will take time for her to get better. She still loves them, and so on. Right now, I'm feeling sad and tired. Jack is here with his kids, and we're going to watch Madagascar 3. I think I'm trying to create as many positive memories as possible. Jack is doing the same, and his kids, along with mine, seem to be doing much better now. I believe we'll be okay. I believe my ex passed away from an overdose while in rehab. We're not sure how she got access to medicaments, but she must have taken them while inside, and it seems something went terribly wrong. Substance dependency is a real issue, and it's truly heartbreaking. Seek support from your family if needed, and focus on taking care of your children. The current situation is distressing, but it will get better. Remember that your children need you more than ever, and your in-laws are going through even greater pain than you. Best of luck, and stay strong.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I'm 30 now, but this all started about a year ago with my ex, Kathy, who's 27. We were together for 5 years, but we've been close since we were kids. She was the only one who showed up to my 18th birthday party when everyone else bailed. That's the kind of history we had. I thought I knew her better than anyone, but I was so wrong. Kathy wasn't just my girlfriend. She was like family. She was there for me through a lot. Like when I lost my job a few years ago, she was my biggest cheerleader. And when my dad was in the hospital, she stepped up to help my mom while I was stuck working overtime. We even started talking about building a future together, getting married, having kids, all of that. I thought we were on the same page, but then, out of nowhere, I get this random Instagram message from a girl named Lisa. At first, I thought it was spam, like one of those fake accounts trying to sell something, but when I read it, I felt sick. Lisa said she had proof that Kathy was cheating on me. At first, I didn't believe it. I mean, Kathy cheating? It just didn't add up. But then Lisa started sharing details that were too specific to ignore. She claimed Kathy had been seeing some guy named Roger for a while, and had even told him she was pregnant. That caught me completely off guard. Kathy hadn't said a word to me about being pregnant, and that just didn't add up. The whole thing felt off. Who was Lisa, and why was she telling me this? I asked her straight out, "How do you know Kathy?" And why are you getting involved in this? Lisa replied that she wasn't a close friend of Kathy's, just someone who knew the truth. That didn't sit well with me. Why would someone go out of their way to expose someone else's relationship unless they had an agenda? Was Lisa just trying to stir things up for fun? Or did she have something against Kathy? She told me she was a friend of Roger's and found out about the affair after snooping through his phone. Apparently, she'd seen enough of Kathy and Roger's messages to piece everything together. Lisa claimed she felt bad for me and thought I deserved to know the truth. But was she really being altruistic, or was there something else at play? Her timing seemed too perfect. She reached out to me out of nowhere with screenshots and even a video. It was hard not to question her motives. I messaged her back, saying, "Okay, you've got my attention. Show me the proof." Part of me was hoping she'd back off or admit she didn't have anything concrete, but she didn't. Instead, she sent a series of screenshots, texts between Kathy and Roger. These weren't just friendly messages. They were explicit, graphic even, things I couldn't unsee. It wasn't just painful, it burned. Still, I wasn't ready to fully buy into Lisa's story. Screenshots can be faked, right? So, I pressed her further. "Why are you doing this?" Her response was blunt. "Because Kathy's been playing you. Roger's an idiot, and Kathy's not as innocent as you think. Someone needs to tell you the truth." Then Lisa lost it and sent me a video. It was Roger laughing with his friends, talking about how he'd been sleeping with Kathy and how she told him the baby might be his. My stomach turned. I didn't want to believe it, but the way Roger was talking, the smug tone in his voice, it felt too real to ignore. Even with all that, I still couldn't shake the feeling that Lisa might have her own agenda. Why now? Why me? Was she doing this to help, or was she just trying to hurt Kathy? I asked her one last time, "What do you get out of this? What's your angle?" She didn't sugarcoat her answer. "I'm tired of seeing Kathy and Roger get away with their crap. You seem like a decent guy, and you deserve to know the truth. Do with it what you want." At that point, I didn't know what to think. Lisa's story made sense, and the evidence was overwhelming, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was just a pawn in someone else's game. Was Lisa telling the truth, or was she just trying to ruin Kathy for reasons I didn't fully understand? I saved everything she sent me. The screenshots, the video, her messages explaining how she knew Kathy and Roger. Even if I didn't fully trust her, I couldn't ignore the weight of the evidence. Each screenshot chipped away at the Kathy I thought I knew, and every second of that video forced me to face a reality I didn't want to accept. I stared at my phone, my mind spinning. I wanted to throw it across the room and make it all go away, but that wouldn't change anything. I kept scrolling through the messages, hoping for something, anything, that would make sense of it all, but nothing did. The Kathy I thought I knew, the one who'd been my partner and my safe place, wasn't real. She'd been lying to me, sneaking around with Roger while pretending we were building a future together. And Lisa, whoever she really was, had exposed it all. Whether she was a friend, an enemy, or just someone trying to stir things up, I couldn't ignore what she'd shown me. It didn't make the betrayal hurt any less, but at least now I knew the truth, or at least, I thought I did. Kathy was out visiting her parents when all this happened, which gave me time to think. I packed up her things, everything she'd left at my place, and put it in the trunk of my car. I wasn't sure how I'd confront her, but I knew I had to. There was no way I could pretend everything was fine when she got back. Later that evening, she returned, all smiles, acting like nothing was wrong. She hugged me and said she had some exciting news. She told me she was pregnant. My blood boiled. I had to fake a smile and act thrilled, even though everything inside me was screaming. I suggested we go out to celebrate, and she thought it was a great idea. Instead of celebrating, I drove her to her parents' house. The entire ride, Kathy kept asking why we were going there, and I just told her, "We'll talk when we get inside." I needed her mom there, because I knew Kathy would try to deny everything, and I wanted a witness. When we walked in, Kathy's mom glanced up from her phone. "This is a surprise. What's going on?" Kathy, still caught up in her delusion, spoke up. "We have some big news to share." I shook my head and cut her off. "Nope, not the news you're expecting." Kathy turned to me, confused. "What are you talking about?" I stared at her. "I know, Kathy. About Roger. About the texts. About the baby." Her smile instantly faded. "What are you even talking about?" she asked. Her mom leaned forward. "Who's Roger? What is he saying?" Kathy started scrambling for an explanation. "He's misunderstanding something. It's not what it sounds like." I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through the screenshots. "Not what it sounds like. Then explain this. Or better yet, explain why your boyfriend's bragging about sleeping with you and getting you pregnant." Make it make sense. Her mom shot up, her face filled with shock. Kathy, is this true? Don't stand there lying to me. Kathy started tearing up. It was a mistake, okay? I didn't mean to hurt anyone. A mistake? I let out a dry laugh. Kathy, you carried this on for 2 years. 2 years. You don't just trip and fall into a 2-year affair. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Her mom's eyes narrowed. 2 years, Kathy? What were you even thinking? And this Roger? Is he the father? Kathy wiped her face and mumbled, yes, but it's not what you think. I snapped. It's exactly what I think. You've been lying, sneaking around, and now you want me to pretend none of this happened? Be your backup plan because he bailed? Absolutely not. Kathy threw her hands up in desperation. I'll fix this. I'll do anything. I'll get rid of the baby if that's what it takes to make things right. Her mom started yelling. What are you even saying right now? I shook my head, disgusted. Wow, Kathy, that's your solution? You think you can erase all of this, and we'll just go back to normal? You really think I'm that stupid? Kathy stepped toward me, pleading. Please, I love you. I can't lose you. You already lost me, I said coldly. I grabbed the bag of her things I had brought with me and shoved it toward her. I don't want anything of yours in my house. We're done, I said, my voice cold and final. Kathy's mom stepped in between us. Wait, let's talk about this. Maybe we can. No, I cut her off. There's nothing to talk about. She made her choices. I'm just here to make sure you know the truth. Now you can deal with her. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I drove home in silence, my mind reeling as everything I thought I knew seemed to collapse. When I arrived home that night, I sat in my car, trying to process it all. Kathy's tear-streaked face, her mom's angry yelling, and the panic in Kathy's eyes when I showed her the screenshots. They all replayed in my mind, like scenes from the worst movie I'd ever seen. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe properly, and for a moment, I thought I might lose control. But I didn't. I stayed still, numb. Eventually, I forced myself to get out of the car and into the house. The silence inside was deafening, a quiet that was louder than any noise. Kathy's things were gone, packed up and taken to her mom's, but the emptiness felt different. It wasn't just the end of a relationship. It was the end of a life I thought I had built. 5 years of memories, plans, inside jokes, and dreams, all shattered in an instant. I walked into the living room and froze. The couch caught my eye, the one where we'd spent so many nights binging bad TV shows and eating takeout. It felt surreal, like the space no longer belonged to me. The house was mine, but it didn't feel like home. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, Kathy's face, her tears, and her desperation haunted me. I kept wondering how I didn't see it coming. How had I missed something so huge for 2 whole years? By the time morning came, I felt like a shell of the person I once was. I checked my phone, and it was flooded with texts from Kathy. At first, they were standard apologies. Can we talk? Please call me. I'm so sorry. But by the time I got to the end of the messages, they had turned desperate. I'll do anything to fix this. I can't live without you. Please don't do this to us. I couldn't respond. What was there to say? She didn't just make a mistake. She destroyed everything. I blocked her number by the afternoon, hoping that would end it. But I underestimated her determination. By that evening, she had moved to social media, flooding my accounts with the same routine. Apologies, promises to change, begging for another chance. I blocked her on every platform. Then the emails started pouring in, long-winded messages about how she couldn't live without me, how she'd never forgive herself. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave me alone, to stop dragging this out. But another part of me refused to give her the satisfaction of knowing she'd gotten under my skin, so I ignored her. Later that day, Chloe showed up unannounced. She's always been the one to step in when my life falls apart, and this time was no exception. All right, spill, she said as soon as she walked in, her arms full of snacks and drinks. I didn't even know where to begin, but once I started, it all came rushing out. The DM from Lisa, the screenshots, the video of Roger, Kathy's confession, and everything that had happened at her mom's house. Chloe sat there, her face going from disbelief to pure anger. 2 years, she shouted, nearly dropping her drink. And you had no idea? I shook my head, bitterness rising in my chest. She played me like a pro, I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Chloe's protective side kicked in immediately. She doesn't deserve a single second of your time. You know that, right? She said, her voice firm. I nodded, but it didn't make the ache in my chest any easier. Chloe stayed for hours, helping me work through everything and cracking jokes to lighten the mood. By the end of the night, she was even joking about changing the locks, just in case Kathy got any ideas. The next day, I called my mom. I'd been dreading that conversation because she'd adored Kathy for years. She'd always called Kathy the perfect match and couldn't wait for us to get married. Breaking the news felt like admitting I'd failed somehow, even though I knew deep down it wasn't my fault. When I showed her the screenshots, she just stared at them in silence for what felt like forever. Finally, she spoke up, her voice soft, almost as if she couldn't believe the words she was saying. She cheated, she said, and I nodded, unable to meet her gaze. After a long pause, my mom shook her head. I can't believe she did this to you, to us. That last part hit hard. Kathy wasn't just my girlfriend to my mom. She was family. My mom started venting about all the effort she had put into building a relationship with Kathy. It was clear she felt betrayed too, like Kathy had let the whole family down. In the days that followed, Kathy's messages slowed down. Maybe she was finally getting the hint, or maybe she was just regrouping. Either way, I didn't hear from her directly, but the drama wasn't over yet. One night, Kathy's mom called me. Her voice was heavy with embarrassment and regret. "I'm so sorry for what Kathy did," she said. "I raised her better than this. She's devastated. You know, she knows she messed up, but she's still my daughter, and I have to ask, could you at least talk to her?" I sighed, already exhausted by the conversation. "I appreciate you calling," I said, "but there's nothing to talk about. She didn't just hurt me. She destroyed everything we had. I can't come back from that." Her mom sounded defeated. "I understand," she said softly, though I could tell she was disappointed. After we hung up, I felt a mix of relief and frustration. Relief that I'd stood my ground, and frustration that the people around Kathy still thought there was a way to fix things. There wasn't. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. Breaking up with Kathy was tough, but the hardest part was finding out that some of my so-called friends had known about the affair and didn't tell me. They had been sitting in the front row to my betrayal and chose to stay silent. It wasn't just Kathy who had stabbed me in the back. It felt like a whole group of people I trusted had turned against me. I discovered this bit by bit after the breakup. One friend, Sam, slipped up during a conversation a few weeks later. He casually mentioned how he'd always thought Kathy and Roger had too much chemistry. Too much chemistry? What the hell does that even mean? I pressed him, and it turned out he had seen them getting a little too cozy at a party months before I found out. "You didn't think to tell me?" I asked, my voice sharp. "I didn't know for sure," he stammered. "I didn't want to stir up drama if it was nothing." I didn't buy that excuse. If the roles had been reversed, I would have told him in a heartbeat. It felt like everyone had decided I wasn't worth the honesty. It wasn't just Sam either. Several mutual friends admitted they'd heard rumors but didn't think it was their place to get involved. Their silence felt like another layer of betrayal. If that random girl hadn't messaged me out of the blue, I'd probably still be raising a kid that wasn't mine, thinking I was some stand-up dad while Kathy kept sneaking around with her side guy. Fast forward a year, and I was finally starting to move on. I was beginning to feel like myself again, hanging out with friends who actually cared about me, focusing on work, and even dipping my toes back into dating. Life wasn't perfect, but it was stable, and I was okay with that. Then, out of nowhere, Kathy messaged me. The first time was just a simple, "Hey, can we talk?" I didn't even open it. I blocked her immediately. Whatever she had to say, I didn't need to hear it. A few days later, though, she showed up at my door. I saw her through the doorbell camera before she even rang the bell. I won't lie, she looked awful, a far cry from the Kathy I used to know. She was a mess, and part of me almost didn't recognize her. I didn't open the door. I didn't even step outside. I spoke to her through the camera. "What do you want, Kathy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked directly at the camera, her eyes welling up. "I just need to talk to you," she said, her voice cracking. "Please let me in," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "No," I replied flatly. "You've got no business being here. Say what you need to say and then leave." She started crying, which, I'll admit, made me feel a bit uncomfortable. Then she told me that Roger had ghosted her. Apparently, he vanished shortly after their child was born, leaving her to handle everything alone. To make matters worse, her parents had kicked her out, saying they were tired of cleaning up her messes. "I don't know where else to go," she sobbed. "I thought maybe you could help me." That was it. Any pity I had for her vanished instantly. "Help you?" I repeated, my voice thick with disbelief. "You want me to help you take care of the kid you had with the guy you cheated on me with? Are you serious right now?" "Please," she begged. I don't have anyone else. I stared at her through the camera, struggling to process the sheer audacity of what she was asking. This was the same woman who lied to my face, betrayed me for 2 years, and now expected me to fix her life like nothing ever happened. Kathy, I said, my voice cold, you made your choices. You chose Roger. You chose to lie, and now you're dealing with the consequences. That's not my problem. It hasn't been my problem since the day I packed your things and drove you to your mom's. She cried harder, but I wasn't moved. You need to leave, I said firmly, and don't come back. Don't message me. Don't call me. As far as I'm concerned, you don't exist anymore. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at the camera, like she was waiting for me to change my mind. When I didn't, she finally walked away, still sobbing. After she left, I sat down on the couch, my mind racing. Part of me felt guilty for being so harsh, but another part of me thought it wasn't harsh enough. What did she think was going to happen? That I'd open the door, hug her, and agree to play dad to Roger's kid? The audacity was unbelievable. Over the next few days, I kept expecting Kathy to show up again, or send someone else to beg for my help, but she didn't. Instead, I started receiving messages from her friends. One read, Kathy's struggling, and you won't even help her? Another one said, you're really just going to abandon her after everything you two had? I ignored them at first, but they kept coming, each message trying to guilt-trip me into taking her back. They called me heartless, selfish, and threw every insult they could think of. Some of them even dragged up our past, claiming I owed it to her because of all the years we'd spent together. But here's the thing, Kathy wasn't just someone I dated for 5 years. She was the person who betrayed me in the worst possible way. She didn't just hurt me. She shattered my trust and made me question everyone around me. I didn't owe her anything, and I wasn't going to let anyone make me feel otherwise. By the end of the week, I had blocked every one of her friends who messaged me. I didn't have the energy to argue with people who clearly didn't care about what I'd been through. If they wanted to support Kathy, that was their choice, but I wasn't going to be a part of it. That chapter of my life was over, and no amount of guilt-tripping was going to pull me back into it. But Kathy didn't stop. Neither did her friends. After she showed up at my door and I shut her down, it was like a switch flipped. They doubled down, flooding my socials with messages. They called me names, threw guilt trips at me, and tried everything to break me down. One message said, you're such a coward for leaving Kathy when she needs you the most. Another one said, you're less of a man for not stepping up. The entitlement in their words was mind-blowing. Some of Kathy's friends even started leaving nasty comments on my work profile, where I'd shared some professional achievements. That was the breaking point for me. I started documenting everything, screenshots of messages, voice recordings of phone calls, even the fake accounts they were using to harass me. It was exhausting, but I had a feeling things were going to get worse before they got better, and I wanted to be prepared. And I was right. Kathy found a way to complicate my life even further. One day, while I was sitting at my desk at work, I got a call from an unknown number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. On the other end was a man who introduced himself as Kathy's lawyer. I froze for a moment. Kathy's lawyer? What could she possibly want now? I asked him to get to the point. He said Kathy wanted to discuss a child support agreement. My jaw nearly hit the floor. Child support? For a kid that isn't even mine? I told him flat out that there had to be some mistake. I'm not the father of that child, and Kathy knows it. The lawyer paused, probably surprised by my directness. He asked if I'd be willing to meet to sort things out. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I figured it was better to handle this head-on rather than let it drag on. So, I took the afternoon off and agreed to meet him at his office. When I arrived, he greeted me politely, but it was clear he didn't fully understand the situation. He started with the usual lawyer spiel about responsibility, how Kathy was struggling as a single mother, and how stepping up would mean a lot for everyone involved. I let him talk for a while, but when he finally gave me the chance to respond, I didn't hold back. Let me stop you right there, I said, pulling out the folder I'd brought with me. Inside were all the receipts, screenshots of Kathy's messages with Roger, the video of Roger bragging about sleeping with her, and copies of every harassment message I'd received from her and her friends. I laid them out on the table, one by one. This is the truth, I said, looking him dead in the eye. Kathy cheated on me for 2 years with Roger. She got pregnant with his child and tried to lie about it being mine. When I left, she and her friends harassed me for months. I've got the proof right here. The lawyer leaned forward, flipping through the evidence. His professional demeanor shifted to discomfort as he got further into the pile. By the time he reached the last page, It was clear he realized he was on the losing side of this fight. But then, as if he wasn't already struggling enough, he added, Kathy mentioned something else. She said you were emotionally abusive during the relationship. That's why she's struggling to make ends meet now. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. Excuse me? I asked, my voice steady but laced with disbelief. He avoided eye contact as he repeated. She claimed that part of the reason she reached out for support was because your behavior during the relationship left her without a safety net. I let out a dry laugh. So let me get this straight. She cheats on me for 2 years, tries to pass off another guy's kid as mine, harasses me when I walk away, and now she's spinning some story to make me look like the bad guy? The nerve. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly regretting bringing it up. Look, I'm just relaying what she told me, he said. I grabbed my folder and stood up, giving him one last look. If Kathy or her friends keep this up, I'll make sure their lies come with legal consequences. This ends now. The lawyer nodded, clearly rattled. Understood, he said, gathering the documents into a neat stack. I'll need to speak with my client about this. You do that, I said, walking out of his office without looking back. In that moment, I was furious. Kathy thought she could drag me into her mess, but she had no idea who she was dealing with. I kept replaying everything the lawyer had said, and the sheer audacity of it all was infuriating. I couldn't let it go. Against my better judgment, I grabbed my phone and called Kathy. She picked up almost immediately, her voice cautious but annoyingly sweet, like she expected me to cave. I wasn't sure if you'd want to talk, she said, her tone like she was trying to soften me up. I didn't bother with small talk. Kathy, what the hell is this about child support? I snapped. I just got out of a meeting with your lawyer, and I want to know what kind of fantasy world you're living in where you think I'm paying for your kid. Her tone shifted instantly. Look, I didn't know he was going to reach out to you like that, she stammered, clearly caught off guard. I'm in a really tough spot, and I thought maybe. She trailed off, realizing how ridiculous she sounded. You thought maybe what? I interrupted, my voice rising. You thought maybe I'd just roll over and be your safety net after everything you've done? Let me make one thing clear, Kathy. That kid is not mine. I don't owe you anything, no money, no time, not even a damn text back. You made your choices, and you don't get to drag me into your mess just because Roger bailed on you. I could hear her breathing shakily, trying to keep it together. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said quietly. I don't have anyone else to turn to. My parents won't help, and Roger's gone. I'm doing this all on my own. I let out a cold, bitter laugh. And whose fault is that, Kathy? You cheated, lied, and tried to pass off someone else's kid as mine. And now you're coming to me because you're out of options? That's not my problem. It hasn't been my problem since the day I walked out. I heard her start crying, her sobs sniffling through the phone. I'm sorry, she choked out. I didn't know what else to do. Sorry doesn't fix this, I replied flatly. You need to stop. Stop calling me. Stop sending people after me. And stop trying to manipulate your way into my life. You don't get to come back from this. We're done, Kathy. For good. I ended the call before she could say anything else, tossing my phone onto the passenger seat. My hands were shaking, but not from regret. No, it was from the audacity she had to even think I would entertain her nonsense. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had truly shut the door on her and everything she brought into my life. And damn, did it feel good. A few days later, I received a formal letter from her lawyer. It was short and to the point. No further attempts at contact from Kathy or her friends. He also mentioned that Kathy had decided to move to another city to start fresh. There was even an apology included, though I doubted it came directly from her. When I read the letter, I didn't feel victorious or triumphant. I just felt relief. The chapter with Kathy was finally, officially closed. No more messages, no more harassment, and no more lawyers trying to guilt me into taking responsibility for a child that wasn't mine. The drama had quieted down, but rebuilding trust? That was the real challenge. Every time I met someone new, the thought lingered. What if they're hiding something too? But I wasn't going to live in paranoia. Kathy had already taken enough from me, and I wasn't going to let her take my future as well. I focused on what I could control, hitting the gym, throwing myself into my work, and spending time with people who actually cared about me. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. One night, while I was out with some friends, Matt asked, "Are you back in the game yet?" I smirked and replied, "Not even close." "Come on, man," he said, rolling his eyes. "Not every woman is like Kathy. Don't let one bad apple ruin the whole bunch." I didn't commit to anything in that moment, but his words stuck with me. He wasn't wrong. I wasn't going to let Kathy's betrayal define the rest of my story. A couple of weeks later, Chloe invited me to a party. No pressure, she said. It's not a setup. Just come hang out, relax, and have a good time for once. I almost bailed, but something told me to go, and honestly, I'm glad I did. The vibe was chill. No awkwardness, no expectations, just good people. That's when I met her. She wasn't flashy or trying to impress anyone. She was just real. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe around someone. Am I jumping into something serious? Not yet, but I'm open to seeing where it goes. For now, I'm focusing on myself, but it feels good to know that not everyone is like Kathy. Sometimes, you just have to close one chapter to start a better one. And trust me, this new chapter, it's already off to a much better start. It's been a year now since I've met someone who makes me feel like I'm really moving forward. Her name is Liz, and from the moment we started talking, everything just seemed to click. We've had our ups and downs, but she's patient, kind, and genuinely cares about me in ways I haven't experienced before. It feels good to be in something that's healthy, without the constant weight of doubt or betrayal hanging over me. But I'm not rushing anything. I want to take my time. We've talked about the future, and while we're both happy, I've decided I'll wait a full year before I even think about popping the question. I want to be absolutely sure that this is the right decision, that we're both in a place where we can build a life together without looking back. Meanwhile, Kathy's life has been, well, a mess, to say the least. She's now a single mom, raising the child she tried so hard to pass off as mine. There's still no sign of Roger. It's like he vanished into thin air the moment she needed him most. And I can't say I feel sorry for her. She made her choices, and they came with consequences. The whole situation is a reminder of just how far off track she had gone and how she tried to drag me down with her. But recently, Kathy tried to make her way back into my life, pulling the same manipulative stunt she had before. She showed up at my door one evening, desperate to talk, probably hoping I'd take her back out of guilt or familiarity. I'm not even sure what she expected, but whatever it was, she didn't get it. The thing is, this time I wasn't alone. Liz was with me. Kathy started her usual spiel about how hard things were for her, how she was struggling as a single mom and needed my help. But before I could even respond, Liz stepped in. I can still hear her words clearly. Ben isn't your safety net anymore, Kathy. You can't just waltz back into his life and expect everything to be handed to you. You lost that privilege a long time ago. Kathy was caught off guard, and it felt damn good to watch. I was relieved Liz was there, showing Kathy what real support looks like. Something Kathy could never understand. Kathy's face twisted with anger and embarrassment, and she tried to argue, but Liz didn't back down. She just stood her ground. And when Kathy realized there was no point in trying to manipulate me, she left. It felt like a weight was lifted. I could breathe easy knowing that Liz had my back. It's not just about protecting myself anymore. It's about protecting the future we're building together. Kathy's chapter in my life is long over, and nothing's going to change that. Not now, not ever. I'm not about to let her or anyone else drag me into her chaos again. Now, with Liz by my side, I'm moving forward. I'm not looking back. I know where I'm going, and I'm ready for whatever comes next. But this time, I'm doing it right. And if I ask Liz to be my wife a year from now, it'll be because, I'm sure, because we've built something solid, something real, together. That's the kind of commitment I'm ready for. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.